Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, welcome. Roll call, commissioners present, Fawcett, Sorber, Hubel, Ford, and Kaiser. It's the hardest part of remembering that every week. Is there any additions to the agenda, commissioners?
Yes, there will be one addition I wanted to add, and it'll be revisiting the fishing ban in Scappoose Bay.
Any of the commissioners support that?
I support that.
I think I'll put you right after the Marina update.
Great.
You go on one topic if you want.
Mr. Kaiser also have Parks and Rec that I did not get put on the agenda, so.
Okay, I would wish to add that. Does anybody else support that?
Yeah.
Kind of set the precedent that it would take two commissioners to add to an agenda just to keep us from too much of that going on. So we will put them, how about at the start of the new business? Let them get on their way. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. That out of the way, consent agenda. Any questions? Move to approve consent agenda A and B.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Buble, second by Commissioner Sorber to approve consent agenda items A and B. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I do not believe that I have a check in there, and I know I don't have a check in there for $381,000. But if there is one, that's Can I Builder Supply, I have a financial stake in that business. But I think this is from when Commissioner Iverson served. Probably is why that's up as an extra item, and we can do away with that, but looking for a motion on check register.
So moved.
Second. And moved by Commissioner Fawcett, second by Commissioner Buell to approve consent agenda item C. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Comments from the public. Anyone present who would like to speak to the commission that's not on the agenda? Is there anyone online, Preston? Yeah, did anybody sign up? Mr. Preheim.
So my biggest concerns, one,
Can you tell us your name and where you live?
Brady Preham, St. Helens,
Thank you.
is the shrinking time that you're giving to public comment. I noticed that it used to be 5, now it's supposed to be 2. I don't know if you can make that motion or you're just doing it, you're getting to the point where you're just gonna, allow you 10 seconds and be done. I think that it's rare that someone probably goes over that, but I think that it doesn't need to be listed as 2 minutes. I also saw, I think it was the last meeting or second meeting, and Mr. Sorber has said that he can't attend any night meetings. To me, that's unacceptable. When you ran for this position, you knew what the schedule was, you knew when you meet. And your obligation is to be here, and if you can't meet that obligation, then maybe you should resign and let somebody be appointed that can. It's pretty simple. You know what your schedule is, you know the meetings. But just say, oh yeah, we're not gonna have any more night meetings is ridiculous. Mr. Fawcett ran on having night meetings, so obviously that's unacceptable to me that you would not continue to have night meetings because one port commissioner who was aware of those obligations before he ran doesn't want to have them. It's ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. Preheim. We have Jan Schellenberg.
Sean, do you want to speak first to the update and then I can?
She's going to speak to the Lignetics update further down the agenda.
Okay, we will call you at that time. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Krista, is there anyone online who asked to speak? Hearing none, we will move to old business. Hey, the Marina update.
Come on down, Marina, Marion.
I'm sure you're gonna want that.
Morning, everybody. Morning. Our upland project's moving along just fine. We're right on time, getting ready to submit our ITB. The plans are at 100%. We're building new pay stations for that. And our maintenance staff found that it was enormously more affordable to build them ourselves from scratch. So they're doing all the welding and framing those up at a step. They're doing a really good job. The only other update we have is dredging, and there really hasn't been any movement since our last meeting. We're still waiting for information from DEQ, but I did take to DSL and OSMB about grant funding money. Whereas if we dredge or not dredge, what happens to that funding? So if we do not dredge, of course, we lose that money. It also does not look good for us, perhaps for future applications. It wasn't advisable by OSMB to refund the money or return it, so to speak. However, if we can't afford dredging, we can't afford it, you know. So those are things that need to be discussed, perhaps. What our next steps are for the cost of dredging, the fact that we can't dredge the channel without perhaps DEQ's permission. At this point, we have been told that we can't dredge it, but DEQ, we're setting up a meeting. They're meeting with their storm management team before they meet with us. And so I still don't have any new information from them. They're still in favor of using the Railroad Avenue as a dredge site, though. That's just the additional cost. We also learned that the channel is 3 to 4 feet, pretty much all the way out. So even if we dredge just the access just outside of our marina, we still have an issue for larger boats and sailboats. DSL is not offering any assistance for dredging or financial aid. It's not something that they do. So we're hoping that maybe DEQ might help us out with the channel. At this point, we don't have any other information from DEQ.
Am I understanding correctly that the state does not maintain the channel outside of Skepper's Bay? They don't have any plans to dredge yet?
Correct.
No.
DSL, correct.
Yeah.
They invite us to do it. Welcome to do it.
Do we know how long that's been, 3 or 4 feet? I mean, is this, my concern with all the money in the projects at the marina is if that thing silts in, road's closed. Has it been 3 or 4 feet for 10 years or is it silting in yearly?
I mean, since I can remember running boats in and out of there, it's never been deep, certainly, and it's always been from right at the edge of our dredging all the way past the Evenson dock there, and then you get a little more water. And it's gonna be really hard to remedy that. I mean, it's just the way that's designed in there and how the water, it's a mud flat essentially. I mean, right now you probably have 5 or 6 feet maybe, but in the summer it might get down to 2 or 3, I would guess. I mean,
Low tide and
Do we know, is it getting worse quickly or slowly? I mean, if it's gonna silt in the next 5 years, I don't see the point of dredging. But that kind of abandons the marina and I hate that idea.
so we brought this up last time. I don't really feel like it's abandoning the marina. I mean, you're maintaining the marina. It's gonna limit what can come in and out. It's not gonna, yeah, it's essentially just like Miriam stated, it's basically gonna hamper sailboats coming in and out. Because that's gonna be your bigger draft. The rest of these vessels that are 2 or 3 foot draft aren't gonna have issue. You know, that's personal opinion.
Yeah, I think some of the larger recreational boats for wakeboarding and whatnot are probably gonna have issues as well, but Nick's experience is my experience. I definitely remember it being shallow in the summers and having to be a little careful, choosy on when you come in and out. I don't, I assume it's been dredged and then it silts back in and over time. I don't know the timeline on how quickly that happens, but.
We do have more on this in the budget priorities recommendations presentation on dredging. We'll discuss that.
You're saying that it's never been dredged? The channel's never been dredged?
Well, not since I've been with the port or even our dredge was 2015-16. We did not dredge the channel. And the previous dredge prior to that was 20 years before that. With no record of what was dredged. We'll probably find out, but I'm not even,
Channel, sorry.
yes, it's not a navigational channel, so we can't get assistance from the Army Corps either.
And how many sailboats do we have in the marina?
I think 7 to 10 perhaps. Yes, yes, sounds about right, 7-ish.
I'd like to engage the state, or state legislators to start looking to get into the funding process and tout the success, and it can't be just for sailboats, but if this continues to sail thin, it's gonna be for everybody. The success of the kayaking and things going on there should help the state realize that this isn't just for a few people in the marina. This is, I mean, that kayaking is rated one of the top tourist destinations in Oregon, so.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna affect kayaking or powerboating at all. It just, if it's, and it's kind of irrelevant anyway, because it sounds like it's contaminated soil to begin with. So that's the first problem. And then the second problem, and that is a large area to dredge. That's like, what is that? Almost half a mile, right? Well, maybe not. Yeah, it's gonna be somewhere right in there. And that's not gonna be a little project. That is gonna be, I'm just guessing cubic yard, quadruple what you're taking out of that marina. So, and if it's contaminated, it's probably gonna have to be incinerated somewhere. And I would guess, I don't know where they would let us put that, depending on what level it is, I'm assuming, or.
The marina, the kayak sediment in that kayak area is clean and can be
Okay.
disposed of anywhere. The marina area fits within the particulates for disposal upland. And we have Railroad Avenue would suit for that site. The channel area has come back, which exceeds the screening limits for upland or in water. However, we are waiting to hear back from DEQ to see if we can still work with them to dispose of any channel sediment at our Railroad Avenue after it's filtered and dredged and burned. It's just a big process.
Right.
That, yeah.
It sounded like initially we couldn't dredge the
Yes.
channel, but now potentially with
Well,
proper handling.
we're getting some emails back and forth that are a little vague. And so we've set up a meeting to meet with them so we can get confirmation. GRI, the people that did the sampling have said it exceeds the levels for upland disposal. However, there could be some different guidelines that DEQ uses that might work within this situation. So before we take that as a final, we want to get that from DEQ. And so they're meeting, like I said, with their internal team, and then they'll meet with us on the channel area. But the issue really, I mean, we could dredge just the kayak area for now. We could dredge the kayak area and the marina area, cap the marina, dispose of that upland, and leave the channel for a later time if we're okay with the expense on that until maybe we find some more funding to do the channel area. But so there are some options, but again, you're putting money into a marina that may be a bathtub, that'd be small boats and paddle sports.
You'll see a recommendation later where we talk about it, developing a plan for moving forward with how we address dredging either this year or not, or so that we may be taking a pause. It's obviously up to your guys' discretion, but we'll have that later.
Okay,
Great.
Does anyone know the draft of a floating home?
And you're gonna be looking at 10-foot minimum with the float and everything under, and everyone's different too with the bars and everything.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
It really depends
Kind of
on
landlocked.
how many floats you have under your house.
the 2-story float that we have does hit bottom every summer.
But they would also be landlocked from either moving out of our marina or bringing new ones in.
Until winter,
Yeah, spring.
right now, I mean, or when they get, when they get the runoff in the spring and you'd have water in there to float them out of there, I'm assuming.
It costs a lot of money to move a floating home. Yeah.
Anything more from Miriam? Were you done?
Yes.
Anything more questions? Thank you. Lacey Cole, Center Point.
Morning, commissioners. Before I go into the airport, I just want to kind of piggyback on Miriam. I do have a marina update. The Columbia River PUD will begin installation of the 3 EV chargers or 4 EV chargers starting on April 23rd. They were going to be digging the trench. MSR Concrete and Peak is the lead contractor on that project. So that begins shortly. Other than that, I have no updates about the airport. Everything is just moving along and nothing exciting, just what we want, right?
The gate working well now.
It is working and we have a new sign on there. So,
Wow. Finally,
No pending through the fence applications.
thank you.
nice.
We had some challenges with the new gate brain that we put on, trying to upgrade things, make them better, and it was a slight difference in the way things were happening. Anyway, nice big sign on the gate when you're sitting at the keypad so you can see what you're supposed to do, so.
Great.
And
Generator project still on track?
yep,
Okay.
everything is moving along slowly.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lacy. Oh, Nick, I put you on there and I walked right past it. I apologize. The fishing,
Oh,
I'm gonna do with the,
yeah, so I can manage, yeah, so a while back, this has been Brian he was maybe able to take this as well, but the addition I had on there, currently there is a fishing ban within the confines of Scappoose Bay. And I think the intent was to make it to where recreational boaters aren't angling inside or anchoring inside of the buoys. There's a footprint overlay of Scappoose Bay there, and it was impeding traffic. And I don't know, last 5, 6, 7 years, sturgeon have really been moving in there and kind of using that. I don't know if it's because of the water temps or what, but there is a really keg of sturgeon that are in there. They've really been congregating in there and people have been targeting them. So you're getting a lot of angling pressure in there you normally wouldn't get. And it's kind of caused a little bit of a ruckus with people casting at boats and stuff. Some of the EDOC tenants were pretty upset. They weren't able to fish inside of their boat wells and their floating homes that they've had for umpteen amount of years. And it kind of inadvertently banned kids and stuff and public from having access to that bank to fish. The suggestion I had was to revisit this and go to ODFW and still keep the ban on anchoring inside of the marina area, because that does impede traffic, and just put a ban on sturgeon fishing inside the marina. And that's not uncommon. That happens all the time out here in the river. The police will still be able to enforce it. It's very evident when you're targeting. If I'm out here trolling for salmon, when salmon fisheries close, they're professionals. They know what to look for, and they can surely cite somebody and remove them. But I definitely didn't want to see a ban from people taking kids down there and fishing off the bank. And that's been going on down there for long as that thing's been there. So that was my suggestion. I know that was a very roundabout way of putting it. But to have port staff look into that and go reach out to ODFW and revise what is in place.
That was my understanding of the intent as well, was to ban sturgeon fishing only, as well as anchoring in the channel. As well as make sure that kids could still fish from the bank down there. That's something very important to some folks in the community. There's not a lot of opportunity for that. So I was a little disappointed to hear that fishing was completely banned as well. So I would love to revisit that and do whatever needs to be done with ODFW and the state to figure it out.
Fishing is not banned on bank. They kept that open for those that didn't have boats and for the kids to come down and fish along the bank. They can still do that. Just can't do it right inside the marina boundaries where there's active docks and boat launches. Having boats come in, whether they're anchored or not, they still come in and cause a navigational hazard to other boats that are pulling out of their boat slips that they've rented. We also have kayak area where there are pedestrians, and the paddle sports people are quite vulnerable to boaters that are casting into that area, trying to get whatever fish is there. I can imagine how difficult it would be if you had a boater coming into the marina to boat, there's activity going on, and then you, maybe a law enforcement, this is not my bailiwick, but if law enforcement comes in, asks them what they're fishing for, and then they say something else versus sturgeon, but maybe they are fishing for sturgeon.
It's not hard.
Easy to tell.
It's very easy to tell, to target. Yeah.
The issue is still, we have boaters that are coming in and out of their boat slips. We have paddle sport people. The marina needs to be safe for all users, not just the fishermen.
Can we pull up a map so you can show us where it's not allowed and where it is just allowed?
Yeah.
All right.
Bear with me one moment here.
Share first. Share. Says I can only be seen by host and co-hosts. So you're gonna have to, I think, make me co-host. Participation. I think that's what we figured out yesterday, wasn't it, Krista?
If you could just pan,
Oh, there we go.
yeah, that would be good enough, I think.
We're not seeing this on Zoom yet.
Oh,
Second.
ta-da. And there's my mouse showing up. Okay.
So maybe we can see specifically where fishing is allowed.
Oh, we need a better view, don't we? So, there's my mouse on the guest dock there. Oh, nice. Thank you. Yours is much larger. Okay, Mary, what,
Fishing is allowed right outside the marina boundaries, and that slide's a little skewed looking, so it's a little bit confusing, but right outside, Mike Jones, that's the last boathouse straight over to the bank where the,
All the areas where kids have historically fished on the left side, starting kind of at the end of the dock or even right behind it is all.
right where his arrow is, that's all fishing available right outside by the nature trail. It's all available.
So we've closed a large section of it where people used to fish.
Yeah, which has been a problem where they fish off the bank because it's so narrow there. They're casting in and boaters coming in get tangled up in the lines. There's lots of bickering and fist
That
shaking.
seems to be related to sturgeon fishing, because I've frequented Scappoose Bay for over 20 years. I've seen kids fishing from the bank there and have not ever seen issues or had them casting way out to the middle where the
We have.
sturgeon normally are.
And to add to that, it's also a ban on fishing inside of your floating home now.
Inside the marina, the DSLE's held, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of in it. That's what I'm kind of getting at. And that little piece down there is only about, I don't even think that's 100 feet of shoreline to fish at the very end there where that mouse was at the end of Mr. Jones's. Don't quote me on the exacts there. I don't have Onyx maps pulled up or anything, but it's a very small, we've really limited the public being in there. And I think the sturgeon ban would alleviate our issues. This was never an issue until sturgeon fishing was going on in there. And I'd be the,
Okay.
can you, Mary, I'm sorry, after you're done, Commissioner Sorber.
yeah, no, and anchoring in the marina is a no-brainer to me, right? Because that's impeding traffic and we can't have that. I mean, and I know that was going on. Or trolling, I don't know what you troll for in there, but anchoring period is a no-go but as far as a complete ban inside of there and inside of your floating home, I just feel like we're really taking away from our floating home members and the public.
I think we overdid it. It's overkill. there's ways to allow kids to fish without it being a safety issue, and banning sturgeon fishing, I think, is the way to do it.
How did the conversations go with the advisory committee on this topic?
The advisory committee was in favor. We've been working on this for a year. As I gave updates, there were no opposition. There were EDOC tenants attending each meeting. We didn't hear anything or have any questions regarding any assumptions. So
So having attended those
Yeah.
meetings for several years now,
mhm,
I was really shocked by this because the discussion that I remember was always to ban sturgeon fishing and not to ban kids from fishing in those areas. So I don't know if there was some confusion on what was being proposed or if more was done than what was actually talked about. Or maybe the state said, this is the easy way to do it, so we're just gonna ban it completely. But
There's someone at the door.
It's a donation letter.
Okay, great.
my recollection is different than that.
well, we can pull up the minutes if you like to the meetings.
Let's bring it back.
Talking about fishing in general.
You guys are given direction to revise the policy. Let's go back to the advisory committee and Brian, you'll be there.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll be there. And let's work through it. Come to a solution on this.
Excellent.
Yeah, hopefully most will be happy.
On the other side, if somebody's complaining about bait fishing with boats, I fish and boat in the Clatsville River, which is wide as this room, that never comes up, so. Unless they're using giant bobbers or something, I don't know how that would.
I think with kids, it's easy to see. A lot of times it's how far can you cast? I remember those days, right?
Sure, but then it goes to the bottom, I mean, unless you're aiming at a boat, but
Yeah.
then you're,
Yeah, which has happened
yeah,
as well.
then you're knucklehead.
Temporary rulemaking process going on, right?
Temporary rule at this point
Yeah.
is scheduled to go permanent.
So.
And
We've
that's,
got some options.
and that's why, before it goes permanent, that's why I want to make sure this thing is suited for all parties here.
The other option is to perhaps move buoys in so that doesn't include or draw the area that doesn't include EDOC tenants. But, that's one modification.
More to come.
Very good,
Thank
thank you.
Okay.
On another note, when was that picture taken?
This one here?
Uh-huh.
Is this
That was no, last fall.
That's
23?
Yeah.
Take a look, Birdie.
Wow, look at how shallow that
I was
is.
gonna say, it wasn't at high tide last fall.
You guys can see the channel sort of marked here with these.
And it's like that all the way around the corner, all the way to our facility, and it's quite a ways. I mean, and then at Multnomah, it gets pretty deep right in there, and then you're kind of good to go all the way out to the main slough there.
All right, thank you. Elliot.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
So when I last updated the Port Commission during the March 14th commission meeting, we reviewed slides that took us through the evolution of the pipe bridge. At that time, the product line, vapor recovery, and inert gas lines had all been repaired and returned to service. So after a bit of a lull, activity is now picked up. The picture you're looking at now was taken on April 1st. To orientate you, I'm standing on the bank near the base of the new pipe bridge, looking across the river, towards the river. And as you can see, the permanent walkway is now in place and extends the full length of the pipe bridge. Safety lighting has been installed. And this slide also gives a good view of the various pipes on the pipe bridge. And just to show you what is what, starting on the left, go back. And if you could use the mouse to go to the far.
Actually, the mouse isn't showing up on the folks, so yeah. I'll kind of point, people can see me. I'm starting on the left.
Magnify it though.
So that's good. Yeah. Okay, starting with that line, that's the PGE water discharge line.
This one?
Yes. The next one to the right is the CPBR product line. The next one to the right of that is the port's fire water supply line. The next one is the inert gas line used by, well, would be used by CPBR if they were using ethanol. And the next line is the vapor recovery line. And then you see to the right of that, three conduits, electrical conduits that are not connected at the time of this picture, which again was April 1st. Those will house various things like CPBR's fiber optic lines for controlling their equipment. PGE will use a couple of them for power supply and to control their telemetry data from their water discharge system. So in this picture on April 1st, the two water lines are installed and the heat trace has not yet been added. But the heat trace, when it's installed, will basically, if you can visualize, in fact, you'll see it, electrical cables that heat those lines to keep water from freezing. The absence of the heat trace does not mean the system is not operational. In fact, we are up and running on the fire system. The maintenance staff tested it last week and confirmed everything is working as it should. Slide. This one's going to show the light. So this shows the walkway again, and I kind of I included this one because I like the lineup of the safety lights on the bridges. You can see just how many there are. I think there's over 15, but that's the string of them.
Oriented in a downward.
Yes, we're originally facing a little bit up, but they've been orientated facing down.
We have had complaints in the past from neighbors across the river. Next slide.
It's good, but it's uneven handrail.
Yeah. So this picture was taken on April 4th, and I'm standing on the rail trestle on the downseat end of the main dock, looking upriver towards the main dock. The shore is on my right, and as you can see, the river is on the left. And I included this one because you can see PGE's famous water diffuser at the bottom, the sort of, let's call it an oval shaped silver pipe. And it's surrounded by temporary scaffolding that was used by the technicians while they were connecting that water line to the diffuser. And last week, PGE switched from the temporary water discharge line that was operating underneath the old downstream approach. And they're now using their permanent water line and that diffuser. So this photo was taken on April 1st, and I'm standing on the main dock.
Kelly, I have a quick question about PG's temporary diffuser. Did that just go underwater and span the gap then, or?
The temporary one?
Yeah.
It was no, it was above water, underneath the downstream approach coming from the shore, I would say maybe 75 feet and then just pointed down.
So is there plans to remove that? That'll be.
Eventually, but it's stable and it's above the water.
Thank you.
So this picture, I'm standing on the main dock and the old rail trestle from the prior picture is behind me. And you can see the pipe bridge at the top of the screen. And the pipes going across from that pipe bridge are the product and vapor lines. And the pipe heading towards us to the right there, that's the water discharge line. And here you can see it's temporarily being supported by jacks. Next slide. So this photo was taken on the 4th, and I'm looking the opposite direction. So at the foreground, you can see the product line and vapor line. And I'm just showing you the evolution of those pipe supports. So those wooden boxes that you see underneath at the back of the picture, underneath the water discharge line, those are concrete forms. And on the day that this picture was taken, they were pouring cement. In fact, in the first box, you can see they've already put cement in there. The second box to the right is empty still, but they filled all those up. And then once that cement cures, hardware will be added and the pipes will have their permanent supports in place. So this photo was taken on the shore next to the old downstream approach. And at the top of the picture, you can see the new pipe bridge. And what this picture is showing you is the various pipelines running along the shore from the downstream, the old downstream approach would be at the lower left, going across to the new pipe bridge. So when we saw the water pipes in the prior picture on April 1st, there was no heat trace in place. This picture on April 4th, you can see that the heat trace is in place on the two water lines. So the water line, the bigger one on the left, upper left. Yep, perfect. That's the fire water line. And then the one to the bottom right, one more, there you go, is the PG water discharge line. And really, I just wanted you to see the evolution of these lines. Now the heat trace is in place. There's still some electrical work to finalize that. They're going to put a new electrical control panel on the main dock, but it'll be done relatively soon. And then the next step is they'll insulate those pipes. Again, this is to protect them from freezing. And
So line, is that 12-inch?
our water line is 8
8-inch, yeah.
and the PG one is 6.
And the product is 14.
Yes. So cargo has started to arrive at Port Westward. We've had one train arrive, actually 2 have now arrived this month. And then on Monday, the motor tanker West Virginia came alongside and she was scheduled to load 85,000 barrels. Actually, originally she was going to load 150,000 barrels, but a train got delayed. And she finished loading and sailed, yesterday night. I don't have the actual cargo figures yet, but they expecting around 85,000 barrels. And slide. And thank you very much. Here's a. That was on April 4th. Do you have any questions?
I think Elliot would add that we don't anticipate this kind of detailed presentation going forward, right?
I would agree, yes.
I do like them. They are great though. They're very, I love the pictures. That is,
I mean, it's gonna be done, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If there's anything to show, we'd like to see it, I think. right?
no, I think these are great. It really lets you know what's going on.
Wonderful concrete pads, yeah.
I'll find something. Thank you.
Have discussed with Sean and Elliot, possibility of having kind of a local elected official, gathering when this has substantial completion. We've got a lot of press about it being hit, being down and not delivered, and I'd like to.
It'd be great.
Okay, Lignetics neighborhood update.
All right. We do have Steve Nelson. You want to come up, Steve, or you can just be ready if we have any questions, but Steve had provided an update.
Or Jan or whomever.
And Jan, if you're interested in coming up and having some comment as well, you're welcome to do that. And for those of you that don't know, Steve Nelson is the plant manager over at Lignetics across the street. Steve had reached, we've been communicating and he'd updated me that they have issued POs for the capital items that were discussed. They've had site visits by suppliers and they're confirming construction details. Well, always speak. DEQ has acknowledged their requested permit changes, which is good, but have not yet given final approval. And they anticipate approval around August. Is still what they're forecasting. And they're on track to add the misters, wire misters to the tipper and close the hammer mill and have the sawdust undercover by June 1st, which is great. And then discussions are ongoing on relocating the truck entrance. That's something that we need to work on and figure out how the port wants to contribute to that to help with the traffic flow. So those are ongoing and Steve and I will get our heads together here, figure out the way forward there. If it still makes sense for them. That was one thing that they had to look at was making sure that operationally that it was a good thing for them because it separates some staff and does some other things for them. So anything to add, Steve? Or?
The one thing I didn't put in there, we are reducing our hours. So we won't be operating the plant.
Okay.
You won't be operating on weekends.
I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Well, it's really the business conditions, but we chose to purposely not allow it. So we'll have less of an impact on neighbors.
2 out of 5 is not bad.
That's all I had. Jen, what do you have for us?
Well, I'm glad you and Steve spoke first because that does address some of the questions. Picture's worth 1,000 words, and this is not a very pretty picture. I apologize, and my artwork is not very good. So I guess one of the things that I want to address is yesterday was April 9th. And the emissions were really bad. So I want to say that we can't necessarily go by the calendar on when things need to start being done. And I know we both smelled it walking in this morning. Unfortunately, yesterday there was a very definite prevailing wind coming from the north. I made the mistake of walking to the post office, and with the wind behind me, it was not a problem. The overwhelming smell and the feel of something in the air was all the way down to Kate's house when I turned around to come home. It was irritating to my eyes, and yesterday afternoon was very nice. I would have loved to have worked in my yard. I could not afford to do that because it was so irritating. I called Steve as I was walking back and experiencing this to ask, is there anything odd going on? And Steve was gracious and said, I'll go over there and check. And I did ask this morning, and there was nothing unusual with the operations. So I'm going to say that the problem is those were normal operations, but with the wind direction, normal operations are a problem. I would ask that some of these things that should start on June 1st, I guess, according to the plan here, that they be instituted earlier than that. And I guess if you guys want to look at this, I just took this yesterday afternoon. It's very poor quality because it's very hard to get to a place where you can see from 30 the amount of product that is being stored outside. Would you say Steve, is it more than normal?
It's more than our target, more than I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's a large amount. And the reason I made those little outlines on that is because the height of the stored product out there is almost equal to the top of that building. And I know we've discussed, and again, it's not June 1st yet. You said you'll do a just in time on the inventory, and your goal is to store the product inside. But again, April 9th, and it's a massive amount of product out there, and the wind is carrying that. Obviously, I'm not equipped to say why or what, but looking at what was coming out of the stack at the same time, it was sometimes the plumes out of the stack are like, and you can see them floating. If you look straight up, you can see wisps of them floating overhead at my house. But the amount, the volume of whatever comes out of the stack, it was gushing. So, and again, I don't know what causes that or what doesn't.
Question, actually, it's more for Steve. I'm assuming the ground piles, you guys are probably, since it's wet right now, I mean, I don't know how much of that goes in the air when it's wet and raining. I mean,
Well, that's on the raw material plus wet. And right now, our average incoming is about 55%.
Right.
Which is a slight decrease. We do have more material outside that I would like to see, certainly more than jail like this.
Sure.
It was more, so we actually had to shut down deliveries for about 3 days.
Okay.
And too much, we could not load anymore.
Understood.
Because we restricted our footprint for storing outside material last summer. We had reached that limit, we couldn't offload any.
Got it.
So we reduced our suppliers tremendously. So we're bleeding that down between now. And first, I mean, the sooner the better, but yeah, I would agree with that. I'll check with our material suppliers and see if we can decrease that a little faster. Certainly can get the misters in place before June 1st, and we certainly get this hammered on close before earlier.
And since it's wet out now, I'm just, because I don't know enough about it, I did tour the plant, which was, appreciate that. That's not going, the wind's not catching that and drifting that currently.
On a normal day to day, no, but if we had a number of dry days in a row,
If you had
the
mold,
surface could dry out.
so the intent
We
is,
do have sprinklers out there.
oh, all right, okay,
We start sprinkling the pile up, it's gonna be.
Sure.
Okay.
And I would say, you know, even I am not asking that you run those sprinklers all the time. But if we could keep an eye on the wind direction, that's what kills us is when the wind is coming from the north. And if you were any distance away from here, you could clearly see the wind direction. You know, sometimes it's this way, sometimes it was directly ahead, sometimes it was a little bit that way. You can see it coming through the trees. It has an opacity to it.
yeah, and I can imagine, maybe not so, there may be a day or two, but in the summer, it predominantly in the afternoons, as you've noticed.
It's always.
That's when it's gonna be the biggest, because,
Yeah.
and
The
that's,
driest time, it's the prevailing one direction. And so
Yeah.
anything we can do, you know, from now until June 1st, it really needs to be done.
and you and Sean you already have a June 1st date set for,
That came out of the community meeting a couple months.
okay, so,
It sounds to me like you're saying that's a not to exceed, but sooner if,
Sooner or better, yeah, we can push that up and we have less operational days, so it can. You know, put maintenance guys on that, try to get that accomplished faster.
yeah, I was just curious on that.
Bringing the pile down, I mean, the total volume outside is probably about 50% of what it was 2 weeks ago, but how they're pushing it in, you don't see the depth from the highway side. So I guess it would be the width of the pile. It was the width of the building, you know, to what the timber was that high. So we've dug out on the river side of the pile and pushed in and have it working out.
All right.
Yeah, we can try to get those done much quicker.
Yeah. I think what we're experiencing, and I'm not real big on climate change, but I do think what we're experiencing is that it gets drier sooner, it gets warmer sooner, and maybe even the prevailing wind shift comes sooner. So, you know, without some real improvements in the overall situation, it's just going to be worse.
We do have interim city manager Kim Carver here. Do you have anything to add? You've been attending these. I know you're monitoring it from the city's perspective, but anything to add?
I don't think I have anything to add. Dan's doing a very good job.
We will have an updated schedule coming out later.
Okay, that's one thing that we need to let the residents know, and I actually have that on my list. You know, I took it at face value that things are on schedule, but yeah, the neighborhood needs some positive information if we have it, with things being on schedule and nothing determined it's not gonna happen or.
No, everything's all approved from the board. And yields are being issued.
Okay, all right.
The question mark is when we get the final DEQ approval and actual equipment shows up, so.
And I don't know if you, as a commission, can apply any. Sure.
To the
Oh,
DEQ.
gee.
No
If
problem.
only.
Yes.
kidding aside, I think, I think we would be happy to sure write a letter that says this is a priority. I just know that there's very a lot of weight with it.
How much good that would do, but you know what? It can't hurt. And if you could,
City might be a nice.
it would be great. I regularly give people Elaine Go's phone number, but those are only And, you know, we as neighbors are restricted in what we can do. It has to be documented with a picture at a certain time. And, you know, it's not a knee-jerk reaction. They're not going to jump in their car and come out here at that certain time. And again, you know, if the next day it rains, then they see nothing. So a letter would be wonderful. I would thank you very much in advance if you could.
Yeah, Port City.
I think that is a great offer and we appreciate it.
Got it down here for what you do.
Have you heard anything from DEQ about?
Only other thing that received our application.
That's it, huh? And how long ago did you submit it? It's laborious, yes. You know, that's one of the,
And sorry, but we're working through with our consultants, they deal with DEQ regularly. And the target date was not like just not stage based on their experience.
I think I speak for the commission. We say we appreciate how collaborative you're working together,
absolutely.
and we'll do our part, and get some letters out.
Let's just keep our fingers crossed that this is, these are some solutions that'll get you folks some relief.
I hope so. You know, I would only say that if the DEQ ends up being the foot dragging that causes us to have to endure more of this than we need to, with the plant being on target with what they're doing, you know, that's one of those things that you just say, well, we'll go public with it. We have not wanted to air our dirty laundry publicly, but with DEQ, if they're the problem, then I think we have to. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so now, unless there's any other old business for the commission, move to new business and move to the top, the Park and Rec District folks who will speak to us.
Morning, commissioners. John Walsh, the city administrator for the city of St. Helens, Public Park Board. It's not district, but that the city's park, Parks Department, yeah, and the Parks Committee, that's committee of the commission.
That's got you into. And Jerry, here's another commissioner. Thank you. We're as strong as one,
Scoot, yes. An email forwarded to me that I needed to return a call to Scoot Jacobson, so I call him and he says, I say, this is you, Scoot, he goes,
I can.
yeah. No, you're afraid. We got it figured out though. Great job.
I don't know if any of you have ever been on the Milton Creek property, the port property on Milton Creek. You know, with all the mature trees and the oaks and all that. So if you have, it's easier to persuade you to go forward on this, I think. I appreciate Sean and Lacey meeting with us the other day and inviting us to give you a presentation. Our meeting objectives, this is all, you know, kind of a preliminary. We're still in development. This is, you know, still kind of trying to make a reality of dreams here. So we're just trying to inform our proposal about doing a loop trail along Milton Creek on both sides, on the city property side and on the port side. That, you know, that is the minimum of what I'm looking at. When we spoke with Sean here, he was asking about, you know, trying to get more stakeholders, more groups or entities and individuals involved in the process. And yes, I would like to see as many as possible that we could get in a collaboration for going forward. And, you know, it is still, as I say, in development, so we could, you know, do other things, you know, consider other things to justify. And again, what our objectives is to see, you know, what you guys would like in the next steps to proceed on this. So if I could go to the next slide on that, on the background, because I'd like to do a little chronology since if you could go to the next.
This is the next, after the immediate objectives?
Yeah, but the next one after.
Oh, sorry. Here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got it.
it's chronology. Oh, you're.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So since it was the part of our master plan in 2015, it's a trail again along Milton Creek, plus it continues along the Columbia, Multnomah Channel, and to eventually to the Riverwalk, and that it shows that it was a 2.58 mile trail. What we're looking at, I mean, after walking around there, doing assessments, I've been walking back there and trying to take photographs during the season. See, that's part of trail building, I guess, because I did do a seminar on this, and they were saying, you know, go through, you know, the seasons to get an idea of, you know, where you want to establish a trail. That's what I've been working on. We're looking at the master plan was asking for a 8-foot wide trail with asphalt concrete. What I'm looking at myself is, you know, an earthen trail with low impact on everything, yeah, initially. But as would be nice where the rec center is located on Old Bowden Road, if we had a segment of ADA accessible.
If I could,
trail right there.
make sure you guys have your bearings here. You know, here's our Railroad Avenue property here. And the Bailey Bridge is back up in here, and then that's our Wilds property. And Scott, full disclosure, my mistake, I thought we were talking about coming in on this side and coming back on the other side of the creek. I wasn't aware of this, which to me isn't a deal breaker necessarily, but just getting my full understanding of it. So, yeah, I thought we were going down and back.
Well, I mean, it's a loop trail, so you could actually start from any point.
Yeah.
So I'm not.
Anyway, I just want to make sure they understood where we were speaking of exactly. So.
Okay, if we go to the other
Previous.
background, yeah. So I understand, I mean, well, we met out there with Patrick Berkeley, who was a counselor at the time, and Brandon Sundin, who's a counselor now for St. Helens, and with a number of the commissioners, and back in 2022 to see the initial assessment on the property. Then after that, you know, we were all amazed about the potential there, because it's an environment you won't find really anywhere else around in our area, that you can build a trail and, you know, have that type of experience. We discussed it, but it's been on the kind of on the back burner for about a year and a half. Then I knew Patrick Berkeley was quite keen on it, and I contacted him about, you know, going out there and try to look at this again. And so we've been out there a number of times. Then I brought it to our Parks and Trails Commission, and we formed a subcommittee on trying to move this forward. Was Jerry Belter here is a member. Then as I said previously, we met with Sean and Lacey, and I took that seminar. I know John has spoken about this previously with Sean, and I'm gonna let him say what he's.
Yeah, just a couple words, just the idea of having a connected, all of our waterfront planning from all the downtown work has had this idea of connectivity along the water as much as we can get through the Vineyard side across the, you know, the central waterfront lagoon property there, and even finding a way through the industrial site over to the creek and up into Milton Creek up into McCormick Park and just, connectivity for people to walk and recreate. Like several years ago, even while we were creating the parks plan, we got a bridge to cross over right in McCormick Park there that prior to that, you had to leave the park, go out on the road and go back in. And that footbridge just added so much value and opened up about 30 acres to public use. And, that we see the extension of the downstream of the creek of having trails on both sides is just having that much more value and opportunity for people to, create that loop to come back up and connect to other places. And, former Director Hayes and I had talked about the Wilds project that he would talk about fairly frequently. And having some kind of relationship to make either portions of that, what he called the Wilds. You may not have known about it, but as much. But
We've adopted it.
we've adopted it, yeah. Yeah, it's just a great place, and it has a lot of opportunity right there.
Again, my initial understanding going way back was some kind of a swap. And I think as we've talked a little more, it's like, from the center of the creek to 200 feet or so, you're not gonna be able to ever develop any. Same with the waterfront. Now, the unknown about the waterfront is, we've got a mediation project there, but even after that, what are we gonna be able to do along the waterfront? So there's some considerations on that piece of property. Probably your use is gonna be the lightest impact, so it would probably a no-brainer for that. But as far as future use of the property, which is a big question mark for us, my thought was that given the fact that we weren't talking about trading the Wilds property for anything, we're talking about some access, having that Bailey Bridge there and possibly left as a potential pedestrian bridge after the fact, that maybe if it needs to have the vehicle traffic closed, it could potentially make some sense to keep that there. And I talked about what I talked about, loop back around on the other side of the creek, but also this expansion of the trail, which I know has even bigger plans to try to connect Scappoose at some point, or.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it took us 2 tries, but we did get an ODOT Community Pathways grant to do some planning to connect St. Helens to Scappoose with an off-road, off-highway connection. And we're working on that. So
What would be the target date for a project like this? Obviously, this is the infancy of it kind of here, but when would you like to see this thing rolled out if everything went perfectly? Yesterday?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Money to spend or?
Yeah, give us all the money and we'll put the dream into effect there. Yeah, I would like, well, I'm not sure exactly the feasibility on these things. I'd have to go back to our commission and
some of the previous thoughts on it were that, how could it be beneficial, the most benefit for both parties? And we looked at when the time's right, a donation credit where you get the value of this donation and you have some grant funding that you need to match it with, and you could use that donation to match the grant and everybody's made whole. And also getting that, the access, and we've planned for the access on the industrial side to come in from the other direction. So you wouldn't have to use that for heavy loading on the industrial side.
I know that, some of the considerations we need to factor in is how does it limit us potentially in the future?
Yes.
And as we know, we're looking at a site that Ford hasn't done anything with really since we bought it. Other than, we had some tenants that were using it periodically. And there's still the unknown future of the site, which is some considerations if we decide to move forward, that we have to consider, how we're limited or not.
I would just chime in and say, I love the idea. I love another trail. I do worry about limits to development, but maybe that's something we can look into and get past. I'm curious, I have one concern is we were talking about this site the other day, and there's obviously some environmental issues down there. Are we adding any liability to ourselves, having folks close to the water where they should not be going down to the water? Do you see that as an issue?
Yes, absolutely. The lagoon area, right?
I love the idea as well. I think that's great. This would be a big deal, especially when that waterfront's getting developed. I think I appreciate, we just need to, there's gonna have to be some definitely questions answered on liability stuff down there and, but I think the idea and the intent here is excellent. That is awesome. I mean,
Love to get to it.
that'd be a big, yeah, that'd be a big deal to be able to do that and stay right on the creek. And that's historically property that you couldn't even get to. People, public haven't even seen it. And that's a beautiful creek. I live out in Yankton quite a ways and that creek is in the bottom of my property. So it's a very neat stream and that would be excellent to be able to access that certainly.
It will depend on Elliot's negotiation skills with DEQ.
Where's Elliot at? We got him busy all the time. Yes, so yeah, right. Yes, sir.
The only proviso I have, like the idea as well as you. I want to be sure, easements always trouble me because when you give an easement, you essentially give up your use.
Yeah.
I agree with you that we're not going to use that. I have no issue with that. But I'd like to see it written so that if we need to cross our own easement for environmental remediation or dredge spoils or something that's built in. It'll be temporary projects that could happen where we might need to cross that and just build that in there.
The example, good example being if we're able to dispose of the red spoils up on Railroad Avenue and there's a trail there, the trail could have to be, closed if we go forward and then, for the time of the dredging potentially.
And those may never
Hill
come.
to 8 foot.
Yeah.
And we're not even sure. Yeah, right.
Right, yeah.
Not hypothetical,
Speculation.
certainly, right.
Nice thick base. Yeah.
Current speculation.
If we can do that, I like the idea a lot.
I think, yeah, with our expert legal in-house, we can, come up with something that's agreeable to all.
What is the donation credit? Can you just
Yeah,
a
that's
little more on that? How does that work?
And that was something that came from your side, is that there's a value that you had a match for a grant.
We had grant matching. We can,
Okay, from grant matching.
You needed to match a grant, they needed that 20% match in term of the value. And it's a public entity to public entities, but it does not sound real money.
Right.
Yeah.
I would just say that, we're really in the early stages of this. I mean, we have been talking about this in the Parks and Trails Commission for a long, long time. The city, on the city side of the creek, the west side of it, Boise had a park down there, a private park. At one time, it was absolutely a beautiful park down there. Big fir trees and everything else. So like I said, we're at the very early stages. The city, there's approximately 40 acres in that area. Our thinking is kind of like what we heard earlier, we would like, in the riparian zone on both sides to get it, maybe 150 feet, 200 feet or something like that on both sides of the creek, so it could be developed. But as of right now, the city hasn't even made a decision on the riparian area on their side of the creek. And so that's one of the reasons that, Scott really wanted to come and talk, to the commission here is, hey, yeah, you guys are willing to do it. Now we got to get the city, if we can get the city and the port together, then we can start working out details. These trail things take years sometimes to get everything through because we're working on an urban trail inside St. Helens that we've been working on for 4 years. We think that maybe next year we'll get it in once they get the project down there. But these are slow processes, as you well know, in government, step by step by step.
Yeah, I will point out that last year, Amy and myself and Bob went in and just to get your bearings here, here's the Parks and Rec building here, old pastor entrance down in Boise. The creek snakes through here. We own this side, city owns this side, 40 acres in the old park you're talking about back in here, is that correct? Just beautiful though. We walked and really within probably 100 to 200 feet. I mean, it's rough, it's rocky, it's been quarried out there. It's a lot of dips and different. It's really just a beautiful piece of property. I'll talk about the old trees. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really feel like we'd be giving up much on the banks because of the activity that's been done there. And there's a lot of it that's mapped wet out there still.
But the parks and trails, we've talked about this because as it's been mentioned earlier, this is really a unique site down there for a city. And, we don't think, 40, 50, 100 years in the future. But if this area is saved, I think the city of St. Helens will be glad that this was done.
And I'd like to also point out that, about the corridor, it can be, especially on the port side, there's a lot of drainage there. And so you might have to, on a trail, go a little further back away from the creek in order to be able to get yourself further down the creek. So there, it might be, a little larger than that at times. And, there's also, what I've seen is the, private property that, abuts the port property on that side. There's a bit of a pinch point down by the creek, if I'm correct on that. So, I mean, we have to look at that too. And, obviously the abutting landowners, we want to, include them in anything that going forward.
I do see, I'm looking at it, I pulled up on Onyx Maps, I was looking at it, there's one property, as you pointed out, that's kind of on the corner of it, but
Yeah.
I think it'd still be a pretty safe distance away, I'm assuming you may.
I'm hoping to, but again, these maps that I've looked at are not all that precise and, the boundaries, property lines are still,
And
not sure. I don't know if, I've taken up enough of your time. I still have a few things if you want to continue on, or you can just read them later on too.
I think we have a proposal, we have the concept. I think we're looking towards a calculated yes. So if I'm reading the room correctly.
Any more questions for this?
The one thing I would mention too, I think it's really interesting. You talk about looking into the future. If we look 500 years in the past, what was happening out there? I think you had some information that at the mouth of that creek might have been some prehistoric activity.
Yes, there is, from what Brandon is, quite keen on the history of St. Helens, and he knows a lot. And he said that there is a site, a Native American site down at the mouth. It would seem to me that it would be on the south side, since there's not that much room on the north, but there'd still be some components on the north side. But he said that there's been a lot of people have gone in there and dug up some stuff. So, which is now against the law, and give it some type of preservation and, protection on that site. Plus, there is the quarrying, people, to see that it is a historic component, and that would also have to be, factored into the proposal too.
And one of the stakeholders you talked about engaging is the tribes or the.
Yes, I'd like to, approach them, but the library's gonna be approaching them about an acknowledgement. So I'd like to actually couple it in with them if we could, rather than approach them, so many different times. So
We'll defer to you guys on that.
And when is the city going to be taking this up?
that is something that John might have.
It's part of your parks plan, you said, right? Or
It is part of our Parks Master Plan. Already, ideally, there'd be or another footbridge somewhere in that span of between the ridges. So you could wouldn't have to be the full loop at the beginning. You could maybe have more like an H or an E. You could cross the bridge and go down and back, or it starts to get fairly wide.
So, as I said, the Parks and Trails Commission, we've been talking about this for a long time. And probably the fact we talked about it just the other day, Monday night. We've got to kind of make a proposal that we'll put forward to the city. And really, I don't know what that's going to be, because it's got to be a joint decision. But, I think what we're really looking for is what I said earlier. We're looking for maybe, 150 to 200 feet on both sides of the creek. That's kind of and maybe down where the Boise Park used to be, the private park, maybe a little bit larger area there. That was a beautiful park at one time. Now it's all overgrown. So to answer your question, what's the next step? I have a feeling that, we'll bring it up at Scott will probably put it on the agenda, and we'll bring it up and see what the Parks and Trails Commission would like to do, and then we'll forward that on to the city, and then they'll make their changes, and how that goes.
What would you guys like to see?
Well, first, one of our steps is going to be finding out what we can or can't do on the site and how close to the shore on the riverside. We'll find that out. And yeah, I think that's probably important information as far as you planning for it to potentially go along the river or maybe we do get away with, if we can't do the river, both sides of the creek. So we'll find out some of that intel and go back.
And I just want to say about the possible pedestrian bridge, when speaking, I spoke with Doug Morton about this when he was a counselor, and he was saying that, the widening of Old Portland Road, whenever that happens, we possibly use one of those bridges as a footbridge further along, move it to, further down the creek. It's a possibility. So.
Little footbridges that are on each side.
Yeah, because we'd only, I mean, with that area, the pedestrian access is not that great right there for walking on Old Portland Road. So we could probably just get by with one bridge on that for pedestrian, and that could be utilized as a terminal.
I think we gave an easement for one of those footbridges a few years back. Any other questions? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, I'll see you last night. Thank you.
Pops it right up. Well, sure. But, God's got it.
Okay, now we're coming up with the composting facility feasibility study and Brenda Vassa.
Morning.
Good morning.
So we met in the end of January, and I put together a composting facility proposal for you all that you should have reached your inbox at some point recently, and I'm just here to do a follow-up. I've taken some, I have a small slideshow to talk about it and then kind of do a high-level overview of the proposal today. And there are a couple people online. If there's questions that I can't answer, I'm the project manager, Brenda Vassa. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. For the Agricultural Information Committee out of Clatskanie, and this is for a composting facility proposal. So if you want to go to the next slide. In the so this is just an example that was sent as well. This is what we're talking about as a composting facility. This is a pretty nice evolved one, but this is one that is using aeration, forced aeration to dry the compost and covering and whatnot. So this is one aspect that we're looking at. Next slide, please. So the land that we're talking about, is also a part of the proposal, and this is in Clatskanie over near the Simpson Mill, to the north, a little bit outside of town of Clatskanie. This is we did walk the property with Elliot, and this is a big footprint. Right now, it's a little over 194 acres. It currently has hybrid poplars on it. And there is some discussion for the port to get that land treed. But our proposal would incorporate keeping the trees on the land. This is a long-term solution for the agricultural community in the region. Part of the feasibility study, I did reach out to farmers in the area, gardeners in the area, and in the state, I reached out to specific composting facilities that are not related to a waste management control organization. So no recology, whatnot. It would be an independent feasibility study to look at what other independent composting facilities look at. And the one that you're going to probably be most familiar with, that is the closest. And quite frankly, there are not all that many in the state of Oregon that are not associated with recology or some sort of waste control organization. But the meeting place is a butchery restaurant area that they they have a slaughter facility, a mobile slaughter facility. And then I talked to Casey Miller, who is the owner of the meeting place, and a few years ago, they purchased a farm in Forest Grove so that they could begin running some of their own cows on that farm, but also to provide a composting facility for their animal waste product. And so that they could not pay for rendering services, which is what they currently do. They do not take their animal waste product to the landfills like many others do in the region. So they pay for a rendering service to come out of Portland. It is expensive. It is not a viable option for them, just as an example. So this is an example of what a well-established business in the Portland region has moved towards creating their own composting facility to manage their waste, to use it on their farm and to sell to other farms in the region. So Casey was a great resource. He is open to helping us, making all sorts of suggestions. They do a aeration controlled unit on their farm. So what that means is instead of the photo that you saw before, it's a unit that I had spoken to you about before. It's contained, it's about the size of a shipping container, say. It has a system that moves through, it creates energy. I know that Brian was interested in that energy aspect of it with his background. And so from Casey Miller's standpoint, from the meeting place, is they can't get enough of those in to manage all their waste product that they have. And so they're going to be adding more units to their process because there are in Forest Grove, as we all know, still many farms in that area. And there are people in line right now to buy compost from him through this process. So part of the feasibility, I'm sorry.
How many units do they have now?
They only have one right now. And so there are challenges. Some of the challenges are DEQ. So Elliot, pay attention. The county permitting, because it is an unusual, we're a little, I don't want to say we're a little behind, but some of the processes for these units have been a little behind and it took some time, though their county did push through and actually DEQ was fine with it. DEQ is fine with the composting process in general. They have a lot more established composting around the state. It was just the county restriction. So that is one thing that we know that we will cause delays. Possibly is getting land use up to speed on what a composting facility in our county will look like, since we don't currently have one, nor does Clatsop and whatnot. And this was all based on also the Swansons in Longview has stopped their retail production of composting. They still will deliver truckloads of their compost, but for a lot of farms, they still do order them. But then a lot of regular gardeners, smaller farmer producers can't afford that kind of option. They wanted the option where they could take their trailer and get the 3 yards or what have you. So this is the property that we're speaking of. If you wanted to go to the next slide, great. And so some of our strategies around this and some questions that came up were, we had begun the process because Hannah Woods has applied for a slaughter facility in Columbia County. She has not heard back. It's been pushed back and just pushed off by those who make the decisions. It isn't regarding her proposal by any means. But one of the things that we were establishing is supporting a small entrepreneurial business through this composting facility. And some of the questions that came up were, well, if Hannah Woods and family doesn't get their grant, will we have enough waste product? And the answer is we will have plenty of waste product. We are working with a private fishery and sport fishermen out in Ilwaco, who currently take their product to landfill and would like to not do that. We also have other mobile units in the area, including the meeting place, because they would welcome the opportunity to possibly bypass a rendering service payment to drop more of their product over. And then, of course, there's local butchers, there's Matt's Meats, there's a somewhat newer facility in Woodland that takes mobile butchers. I mean, Matt's Meats is out in our region all the time. And if he could drop before he gets over to Longview, he would. So, and then one of the other composting techniques is biochar, which is taking the actual feedstock, the waste, not animal waste, excuse me, more of a tree. And it's a process of burning it and using it and making a sort of, for lack of better words, maybe a charcoal type of composting. It's very, it holds moisture. It doesn't release the gases that the landfills do. It's just a really good alternative. So that will be one of the aspects that we would be looking at. Again, with a biochar unit, it's contained in a sort of shipping container style situation. And some of these things are, costly. So the windrow, which was the photo previously, is the least expensive option to begin starting with. But we have the ability to move into other areas as well. And would
Cheapest here, this.
correct, because it's just turning and moving soils with the waste product and whatnot.
Brenda, if I could just add, so Hannah and I have been trading some voicemails, and the one I have transcribed to me here, which is funny because it says we did not receive the meat ranch, which I listened to it, actually the USDA grant, what she said under voicemail. The transcriptions. So back to the drawing board on how to fund it is what she said in her voicemail. Again, like I said, we haven't talked, you probably have more updated information than I do.
Yeah, so she has business partners that are willing to just move forward without the USDA grant as well. So that's a separate process, but again, in conjunction with, but I just wanted to point out that their question was, well, if they don't get their grant, can we have the composting facility? And the answer is yes. Because we also have the strategy is what we're all used to seeing with, these hybrid poplars is you bring in a tree cutting service like a Pelham, and they come and they eliminate the trees, chip them, take them into Longview for sale. And I own a property that we had hybrid poplars on it, and we went through this process and we stopped the process after they did partial land, and we went to a thinning model with Pelham instead of a complete eradication of the hybrid poplars, because the damage that the eradication of these hybrid poplars on the land is tremendous, with the dragging of the trees across, the heavy equipment on there and whatnot. And as a small producer myself, we did not want the land damaged any more than we had seen that it would be. In our case with this acreage that we're asking for, and you ask yourself, well, why are they asking for so much acreage? Why can't you do it on 25 acres? Is because we would go through this process and beginning a thinning process. Also in conjunction with possibly running other livestock on that land, you want to have trees. The previous people here were talking about climate change. It's getting hotter, it's getting drier. And so that was another reason that we chose not to take all the trees off. And yes, they're hybrid poplars. They have low, shallow root bases. We took the trees off our land and thinned part of our land. So we have 68 acres that we did this on. And in the area on the 35 acres, we thinned rather than eradicate the hybrid poplar, we only lost 2 trees in windstorms and whatnot. So they can last longer, especially if they've been separated, and they can grow out. And our strategic plan with this would be to take them down in areas, start clearing that land in a sustainable way so that we could begin the farming process as well. And part of the proposal was an overarching kind of look at the agricultural community, in Clatskanie, which is providing other job resources. So not only would the facility itself provide resources, but there'd be trucking and delivering options for those folks who still wanted truckloads of compost delivered. And there are many farms in the region that are still doing that, but they're paying more because it's coming from farther away. All the trucking is coming from outside of and as far away as Chehalis to get, because composting facilities up there are using Weyerhaeuser waste to use their composting styles. So I just wanted to bring up that we would also be managing the hybrid poplars in a way that we are in our land. We will identify trees that need to come down, and we will do replanting, and it will be just a continuous process. From our standpoint, when you see a sort of the eradication of the hybrid poplar in the past, it sort of looks like a waste zone, and it takes a while there's been a lot of damage by the equipment. All the stumps are still in the ground, and there's ways to go about it. We purchased a forestry mulcher, and we are basically doing a small scale mulching of our tree stumps on our land, which works effectively in a small operation, and then we can replant into that area. Because as we know, hybrid poplars will also start to regrow themselves. And you can manage that as well if you want them to grow back and utilize the resources that way.
The other model is we've seen with what Warren Seeley has done on our property he leases directly from us, where he didn't remove the stumps. Did a lot of clearing, and obviously he's planting more shallow than probably what you're talking about, or soil prep that you need for other things. But yeah, kind of an interesting idea that he's able to do what he needs without these
With
stuff.
that,
Right.
yeah.
They figured out how to do that about 10 years.
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So are you planning on having a chipper then on site for this, or would you hire somebody to do the chipping on the poplars, or?
So it all depends, of course, on financing, and we have some grants coming up in June to apply for, as well as in the fall. So we locally, like we have a forestry mulcher that we would be donating to the process, and we know people have chippers. Now, they won't be the industrial size chipper, like, yeah. And people do have those. So we would either bring in somebody, or ultimately the goal would be to be as self-contained as possible and to get the equipment, on site for use on site. Yeah. And so, next slide, please. The options that we provided for sort of looking long-term at what this land and how the port can assist is doing a ground lease with the port, where the port still maintains the ownership of the land, of course. We are looking for hopefully a rent-free period. Again, some of these are my numbers based on what the going rate is today for land being rented for livestock use or whatnot for grazing purposes. And the rent-free period that we're asking for is for land development through a sustainable practice. if we started doing this and we were 3 years into it and everything changed in the whole wide world and it was back to your land, it wouldn't look like what Pelham land looks like that you have no use for at the moment. It would still have trees on it. It would still have the capability for farming on it because once the commissioners agree to a plan, there's work to be done on while we walk the property. Some of us walked only along the edge of it because it was February and I wasn't gonna go down there. But there's a lot of water on it. We need to understand where the best place is to put the composting facility as well as where the best places are to begin removal of trees so that farming practices could be done. It's very much like the Port of Skagit County up in Washington that allowed for small farmers to start farming land on port land up there that you all visited. And that's the idea. We have 5-acre implements for farmers to begin, new and beginning farmers to utilize the land as we clear, as we manage, as we plant, and so forth. The other is if the port is amenable and is interested in a lease to own to purchase agreement. I get into a little bit more detail in your packet. But basically what I've been talking about is harvesting of the current hybrid poplar trees, but it would not be in such a way that we would eradicate all of them all at once. We would probably bring on livestock to manage some of the areas. We do some cover cropping, we do specialty crop planting. There's a big push in the region for doing some specialty hay, things like that. Of course, we were interested in, beginning farmers, and then a lot of the grants that are becoming available for educational purposes, for educational projects, for growing some of these grains, ancient grains that have gone away due to just growing the standard wheat or whatnot, and utilizing some of these principles to grow these grains that have a more nutritious, for lack of a better word, outlook. And so those are things that we would be interested in. And there are a lot of grants associated with that, which would then lead to the potential of another, say, the name of the aeration unit that the meeting place is using is called Eco Drum. So they'll be purchasing another Eco Drum, and again, as we get established, and Casey said they've had their Eco Drum for just a little over a year at the meeting place, and they're finding that they can now pay for another one and so on. And that would be how we would manage our financial security over time, is through the sales of the compost. And as we get better and more established, then you can start purchasing more of these other items like you referred to, because we will have the monetary input. And then for the final slide, I also took this, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep looking at you, I apologize. And so some of these, this proposal works into your key alignments of your strategic plan. This is, we are at the agricultural community in our region, and it's not just Columbia County, it's Clatsop, it's Tillamook, are a socially disadvantaged group. And so when we apply for funding, that brings us to a higher tier level for acceptance because we don't have the facilities, we don't have the infrastructure, and all of those things have gone away. So we also see this, obviously it's job creation to begin with, but then, that 3.3 for a startup in this 3.3 jobs is just for the composting facility at a very bare minimum. That doesn't include that somebody could come in and begin a trucking company, or we begin our own trucking company, or that there's other avenues for availability. So I am here to answer any questions. There's a couple people online. If I can't answer any questions, or it was just a review of finalizing our proposal and seeing where we're at.
Thank you. Questions, commissioners?
I'm not seeing any numbers. Have you put any numbers to any of this?
In your proposal on your in your email, being as far as how much it's going to cost us.
When you finally reach a break even point, all those kind of things.
Okay, I don't know that I have done that piece of it. It's because I guess it would be more, from my perspective, that we would be entering into an agreement that we would meet the conditions of the terms that, of course, council would be involved in, but that we would have to, because that we would meet the conditions of the agreement of the rent. So you are asking for to see how are we going to make that rent after 5 years?
Well, and how, yeah, and what is the, what monies do you need to get started? You know, yeah, I'd really like to see some numbers as to how this would move through a 5-year period. What is the 5 years based on?
It was a number that I did some research on that it takes for a smaller composting facility like this to get off the ground and be financially solvent to pay the staff and have money set aside and so on and so forth. So when I began the process, I was looking for a criteria and from the port about how I would go about, putting this together. And so, we can put together more of a business plan year to year, how we're going to do that. But my understanding was that the port is sort of looking at it from a perspective of a landlord situation. And that there wasn't a criteria for somebody else from a manufacturing to come in and give you a business plan for 5 years. But I'm happy to put that together. That's not a problem. I just wasn't sure at the time that we wanted to see a 5-year overall overarching plan. But we can do that. What I had offered was just what the truckings are and what, this and that, but I haven't done that piece of it, but absolutely can put that together for you.
We've also seen the concept of a land management credit during the 5-year period, where a certain amount is credited back for the work that they do on the site.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
A la Warren Seeley,
Right.
Karen Seeley.
Right.
Other questions, commissioners? No. All right, we have our work cut out for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Yeah, very interesting.
Sorry to hear Hannah didn't get her grant, but
Yeah, she was gonna try to make it, I know, but she's a pretty busy person, juggling a lot of different jobs.
Elliot.
Hello again. Well, good morning again, commissioners. I'm here to update the commission about difficulties we've encountered working with PGE to update Port Westward legal agreements. From time to time, it's necessary to either amend existing legal agreements or create new ones. At Port Westward, these include several use agreements and easements. Many of the agreements at Port Westward involve several tenants in addition to the port, and so they need to be processed within a reasonable time, as delays by one party impacts the others, and it affects our ability to do business at Port Westward. In other words, for Port Westward to work, this process must work. So I want to briefly recap the round of efforts on these legal agreements that I'm referring to. During October 2019, the port sent draft agreements to PGE. In November 2019, port staff and Commissioner Kaiser met at PG's office in downtown Portland to discuss the agreement. and PGE promised to send revised documents within 2 weeks. Again, this was in November 2019. For the past 3 years, we have tried to complete these agreements. And finally, last summer, in an effort to get the agreements over the finish line, the port pushed for an in-person meeting between the Port Westward industrial tenants and port staff. Participants flew to Portland from across the country for a 2-day meeting that took place at PGE's Portland office last October. Port staff, including myself, Sean Clark, Bob Salisbury, attended the meetings. Krista Burns also attended, ran the technology, and she modified the documents in real time as we went over them. And over the course of 2 days, we went through each document line by line to come to an understanding. At the end of the meeting, PGE, CPBR, Port divided up the agreements and set deadlines for each to circulate drafts. CPBR and the port met their deadlines and distributed the documents. PGE chose to edit the water discharge agreement. However, instead of modifying the agreement we discussed at the in-person meeting, PGE proposed a different agreement. And instead of drafting the document they were proposing, they sent a message describing their concept of what the water discharge agreement could be. So then on March 21st, during our regular monthly phone call that has taken place for years, PGE's sole representative attending for the first time, understandably, had no knowledge of the legal agreements or history of them. And he promised that PGE would provide a path forward before today's meetings. On Monday, we finally received a message from a PGE employee familiar with this process. That mail indicated that PGE would have the documents reviewed by the end of April. Today, port staff want to bring these concerns to your attention so that we can find a way to improve the process and finish legal agreements that involve PGE. To reiterate, for Port Westward to work, this process must work. This effort started 6 years ago, and 4.5 years ago, PGE promised to finish the documents. That's still not done. I want to make clear, we don't have a definitive answer to this problem, but some ideas for the commission to consider include: first, remove PGE as manager of the water discharge system. That would require a 180-day termination notice, and we would have to find another party to administer the system. And just to remind you, the water discharge system handles industrial wastewater from Port Westward 1, 2, and if the ethanol plant is operating, CPBR. Second, remove PGE from infrastructure agreements such as the dock use agreement. PGE currently has undefined access and use rights on the dock. However, under the dock agreement, PGE's access rights are irrevocable. Thus, this would be very challenging to accomplish. Third, we could reduce the size of the PGE lease footprint. Reducing the size of their leasehold on the industrial land surrounding Beaver plant would reduce the assessment easements involving PGE and would free up land for industrial tenants. These are only ideas, and we realize the seriousness of each of these choices, but we need to find a better way. And we're here just to ask what your thoughts are on this.
And before we ask questions of Elliot, any discussion of details or proposals or negotiations, we would move to executive session. If we don't have those general specific questions, we can do them here. If we get into any kind of back and forth negotiating, it wouldn't be very smart to do it in public.
I do think we need to know what the legal ramifications of instituting any of these options would be.
But why don't we just plan on doing the executive session? And does anybody have any public questions?
I do have one public question.
And I think we were looking for your public thoughts on it as well.
Sure,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
PG was given the opportunity to be here today,
Yes, they on the agenda.
are not here.
I don't know.
We did have a rep on the call earlier and she dropped off.
There's not, I don't think there's anyone from PGE on there now.
Okay.
My general thought is, the reason I ran for the commission was the lack of use of Port Westward 20 some years ago. PG was given carte blanche just to manage a thing and pay lots of rent every month and be done. And it worked for a long time when nothing was happening, but now we have an ethanol plant and other tenants and other proposals out there. Those don't work so well. The dock was given back to us in exchange for the lease at Cascade Grain, then ethanol plant now. Along with that lease was turned over to us, but PGE negotiated, including the price of that lease at what was well below market at the time, and then turned it over to us. They gave us the dock, as they'll hit us back with. They gave us a dock with an extensive amount of deferred maintenance. Basically almost no maintenance since 1941. So they kind of got set up in an environment where they ran the place like they owned it, and we weren't that relevant, and it's been really tough to change that. Most frustrating thing is by the time we finally get close to settling agreements, personnel's change. They rotate their top personnel and say, well, I'm not familiar with this, let's start over. Pat Trapp worked them really hard about what he called rock mentality. We would say, will this work out for an easement agreement? And they say, no. Well, can you give us some guidelines of what will work? Now just bring us a proposal and we'll say yes or no. He said, we keep bringing you a rock and you keep saying we want a different rock. Can we get some specs on this rock or some guidelines or even some automatic no's? If there's things that conflict with what PG is doing, then we can exclude them from our business recruitment, but I've been able to get any of it.
Yeah, they've proven very difficult to work with. What are we coming up on 5 years now? So I am definitely willing to consider any and all options to encourage them to work with the port in a business-like manner.
PG at one time had a quarterly standing meeting with the entire commission and upper management of PGE. Those went away. We had PG's government affairs person attending our meetings regularly and as a good access point. That's gone away. We've dropped off the radar. Which is funny because the investment back then they had was just Beaver. But now they have about 600, 700 more kilowatts out there. Or megawatts, I mean, and
It's important to note too that, and Robert, you bring this up occasionally, there was a marketing agreement with the port and PGE that was left to be expired in 2008, their decision. Obviously they were, I'm sure, thinking about the future, and I think it's also important to keep in mind, I think we have competing principles here. PGE's, their power generation and risk aversion, and we're economic development. And we realized that together early on, while they were probably thinking, oh yeah, we'd like to get some money on, for the taxpayers on this leasehold or sublease it out. But I bring that up because we do know that they are a good community partner. They're the #1 taxpayer in the county, and they've been a great neighbor for 50 years now. However, for us to be able to do what we're sanctioned with, what we're mandated to do, it's going to require some better cooperation. So that's where we're at right now. We're trying to being able to move the ball forward on things and not, take a couple steps back every time. So.
and maybe on us as a port, having let that slide and not noticed. But there was a much deeper commitment than working together for the years.
Well, 4 years working on the same issue. I mean, how can you possibly do business under those circumstances? I'd really be curious to know what staff's recommendation be. Have you given that some thought?
Executive session,
Yeah,
you want to talk about. Yeah.
Any other public comments or? We get their business out of the way and do the e-session last so that folks don't have to hang around. Okay. Resolution 2024-05. Unless there's questions of Guy, is here a motion? So moved.
Second.
And moved by, Commissioner Buble, second by Commissioner Fawcett to approve resolution 2024-05, appointing Rachel Armitage, Daniel Garrison, Rachel Berry, Paul Langner, who's here, thank you, and Robert Gadadi to the Budget Committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Budget priorities list discussion. Sean?
You? Not here.
I'm gonna take a 2-minute break.
Thank you, commissioners, for your patience here as I test my technology skills. Seen that? Just to start off, this should say staff budget priorities, recommendations. So it does. Thank you.
I was going to say, I think it does say that.
This has been a living, breathing document. So I was looking at a version last night. And we're going to start off a little bit by just kind of talking about budget and what it is. And I'm going to let Guy talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning, commissioners. Yeah, just wanted to follow up on our last meeting, talking about the capital budget priorities. You asked for some staff recommendations on, what we would like to see as staff. And so we've met actually for almost 2 hours, I think, talking about these projects and, just looking out not only at FY 25, which is our next budget cycle, but, in a couple years into the future, kind of projecting what our cash needs would be and, what our cash, what we have cash on hand right now. And, we also want to be thinking about what kind of leverage we could get with grants or low interest loans or things in the future, even the port tax going ahead just to keep projects moving forward. And so this process, just a little background as you've been through it before on the budget, is we'll be talking about the operating budget a little more probably later this month, but there's a budget committee process. We'll have at least 1 to 2 meetings in May, and then the formal 25 budget will be on the first meeting June for approval because it needs to be filed to the state by June 30th. And that budget will include both capital budget and operating budget. And so, we're primarily just talking about the capital side of the budget today. We won't really talk about the operating side in any specifics, but looking again at that multi-year projection and then FY 25, which is our next budget cycle. Just want to remind you a little bit of what we talked about last time with the reserves. And Sean has some slides in here that go a little more into detail, but basically want to think of reserves, and we have roughly just a little under $10 million of total in our what we call LGIP fund, essentially our savings account. And you'll see on the financials that we actually have like 11 million, but that includes the insurance advance that we got. So that insurance money will be, departing. And so I'm talking about what our, actual available funds will be going forward into June of this year. But part of that 10 million would be considered reserves, and that would be like an insurance policy if some unforeseen things happen in the future. Any kind of, it's not funding for projects, it's for what happens if something major happens and we need funding for operations, or just say maybe something unplanned, unknown expense. It's not for cost overruns and things like that. So we have roughly about 3 million set aside in reserves. And then when tenants lease properties, they put their deposits out and we hold those deposits for their leases. So that money really isn't available for the port to use. We hold that back. So that money isn't available. That's about 450,000. So out of that 10 million, we have roughly a little over $3 million, $3.5 million. It's off limits essentially for capital budget projects. And then, and I know I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but sorry, Sean, if I'm taking any of your thunder, but it's on the slide here is roughly 5.8 million. And so the remainder of that would be considered, for lack of a better term, deferred expenses, meaning that it needs to be set aside for future projects, things that we're not doing in this fiscal year, but things that would be in following fiscal years. And so that's what we have to work with. And so how do you spread that out over a number of years, factoring in, what kind of other financing or funding sources we can use. So, and just, depending on how our operating budget turns out, I mean, we have had loss of revenue with the modification we did for next. I mean, we're still working on challenge. It's a challenge growing our current operational revenue. We don't have any new revenue generating projects going on. So our ability to contribute to our reserves is becoming less and less without finding other sources of revenue to contribute to that. So what I'm saying is there's kind of a, don't expect the reserves to grow a lot. So I've just arbitrarily, best guess, conservative guess, but starting out with like $9,250,000. So
That's our assumption going in for
yeah.
fiscal year for capital.
And so that might be a little bit lower than it actually is, but we have to keep in mind that all these budget numbers for expenses are estimates. And as we know from experience, we've tried to be make as educated a guess as we can, but those numbers, generally speaking, are not higher than we'll probably get higher actual costs. So, just factoring all this into the budget. So, that's the basic background on this, and Sean can talk in more detail on what staff has come up with, but I think that kind of sets the stage for us to move forward on this, but we really did put a lot of thought into it as the staff, as you'd asked us to do. And so I think this is a really healthy exercise for the court to go through, looking out a few years. So
I have a question for Guy first. Does next year's budget you'll present to the workshop will anticipate many millions more in insurance revenue, income and outgo, correct?
I don't know exactly where all that stands. I'd have to check with Elliot. I know we got $1 million advance and we've got a pretty good sized bill coming up to where that funding will be paid. And so that will be depleting that money in there. So I don't know what we're looking at going forward, but I would think that. And so I better just leave it there because I don't know enough
I
details.
think it's millions.
Yeah, and
I know we're negotiating with insurance companies and providers and all, but I mean, I think it's several $1 million or more. So I just want to show the income and the outgo there.
yeah.
Because that would be more than our allowable.
Yeah, and I mean, we can always. We can plan ahead. That would be for FY 26, getting some of those projects done if there was permitting or other things involved. And just a little bit of our actual budget, we'll identify these projects, but that doesn't hamper us from,
Deviating from that.
yeah, I mean, you all have the authority to, if things switch and change enough, I mean, we can actually do a budget amendment or, do a supplemental type budget to make changes if needed. But I mean, we're starting with what we know right now. And so even though we may have some funding coming in, like you mentioned, Robert, that's we don't know where all those details are now. So it's kind of hard to put that in the budget.
Estimations and suggestions is what we're doing right now. So you guys can help us a little bit. We look at the first column here that you see was staff's initial, staff. Here's what we got for capital things we want to do, or things we need to be looking at doing. And as you can see here, that brought us down in a negative number if you added, 5% on top of that. And that's not a smart play there. So staff says, okay, let's take a better look at things and take that 5.8 that's available and then essentially split it out across 2 fiscal years. You'll see that next slide here. At 9.25 beginning minus the 2 operational insurance / reserves, Fort Westward reserve / insurance, just in case he's the 450 for tenant deposit. So that leaves us with that 5.8 million balance. And this is what we were recommending to do was, took a slice at some things and, spread some things out. Prioritized by, as you'll see coming up here, at Port Westward, really hampered with that seismic vulnerability assessment. State mandated Senate Bill 1567, we're part of that, being connected to the tank farm and having the pipeline on our dock. And we'll be better for it after everything's all said and done and we get things up to modern codes. But what we did figure out was the water supply is really a nice to have, not a must have. And we can push that down a little bit. So take 750K off of that and we'll be looking at hopefully 1.95 or less. It's never going to be this say, but our estimation.
Does that include potential grant funding?
No, not this time.
But we've submitted for a Connect Oregon grant that would.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
I was gonna add to that same question that keeps coming up. I never participated in this internal budget discussions until last year. And I think it seems, I'm now aware that it's human nature to keep thinking of all the ifs, but this is just as of right now.
Okay.
So there's a lot of ifs out there and that's not part of this. All the grants, everything else, it's not part of this.
So we get some grant funding, we might be able to add back in some other projects. That's kind of where I was.
This is just, so this is what we know as of right now. We know we're gonna have, got it.
Yep.
Different than any public budgeting I've been involved
And this isn't formal either. This is not formal budget committee. We're just trying to get Guy prepared to make a draft budget document that we can then present to everybody. So we want to get ahead of it. It was new for Guy on this side of the river. And we still have Bob G involved and he's been very helpful. And I just thought let's, as opposed to last year, we were kind of at the end there, well, what are your priorities? We were kind of reaching out separately and let's just kind of get us focused and we'll get the budget document filed in as a draft and know that there could be supplemental changes should other things come up. Out at the airport, you can see in green here as the grant monies that we've received. I'm hoping you can see that color. That middle number there is grant funding, FAA, ODA. And so initially staff was looking at 750K to spend out at the airport. That's minus the grant monies. We decided to take a look at taking off these right-hand items there, no grant money currently affiliated with those, and get that number down to 250K for the next year.
looking for suggestions.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Well, it's hard to say no, but we put the east side hangar demo monies back. Commission.
Yeah, I would.
We have promised that for so long, that 20 years I've been on there. You take us by and show us these things are dilapidated, you're gonna fall down.
And if we don't, that's gonna fall down.
Okay.
So I mean, and that's just a demo cleanup. I mean.
That over.
But also the design aspect is part of that as well. So the total will be 100,000.
You got a design taking it down?
We can't just do the demo, not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Pause. Yeah.
And just have, that's what my main concern, and then we can reconvene and look exactly, you know.
Having a blank slate's easier to look at options.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if I can live with the design money being pushed out, but I'd love to see that cleaned up.
Okay. Got it. We were looking at the interim location for the maintenance shop out at the Railroad Avenue facility. You see that building in the view there. That is the area that unfortunately, this is not an ideal space. It's secluded. There'd be a lot of that money is security fencing and cameras and things. And so maintenance staff and Miriam, we got together with them and we decided, let's not look at Railroad Avenue. Let's look at the opposite end of this view here, which is the entrance to Multnomah. This is the very end of the road. As you enter, where actually we were proposing the new shop building down there at Winter Circle. The team is looking at being able to inhabit that area there and operate out of there. It does play into the potential future, development of that little site there. We have some opportunities on both sides of that road that go down, that driveway that goes into there. So getting our folks out there could be good as we prepare that site for potential future workshop building if we have to move forward with that in future fiscal years. Unfortunately, and this is another one that you guys may have an issue with, because I know this is very difficult for staff. We because we don't have a tenant. This one's gonna make more sense when we have a bird in hand. You know, the spec building idea, at least for the next couple of fiscal years, is probably not the smartest. But if someone comes knocking and they want to build something, we'll entertain all offers. And again, if you guys see anything here that you would like to have corrected, let us know. Marina, we could probably have a work session on this, and maybe we should. There's the green numbers are the grant funding that we're expecting to get, that we've been awarded. Miriam did mention earlier that her discussions with top folks at OSMB is that it will not look good if we give back grant money. However, if we're spending ourselves into a hole, that's gonna look worse for us. So we may have to end up dealing with some of that, the ramifications of turning back grant money if that's what we decide to do and not dredge, for now. We have some ideas on what we could do, with the marina. Guy had mentioned some good things.
Question on the dredging grant funds. I'm assuming we submitted for grant funds with the overall project, right? Which is now much more difficult to do. Is there a way to either A, get an extension on that? Or B, change the scope of it and still utilize some of the grant funding to just do say the marina?
She's asked those questions. It sounds as though, while yes, we could do smaller scope area, the amount's gonna definitely decrease.
We'd still have to put.
Based on our estimate,
So to get the 485, that amount of money, it has to be in the scope.
7,000 cubic yards.
I'd be curious to at least see the numbers on the other options, you know, it's like we spend 800,000, but we get 300 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
The challenge is, with what we propose to do, how we're able to dispose of it, right? So the main bathtub, which you'll see here. Let me know, just want to see. Let's look at here real quick. I bring up this illustration for you. This is some high-tech hydrographic surveys here. The blue is deep. And then this is almost outlines our DSL leasehold here. And then the green is the channel. You can see the EDOC there. This is deep-ish, I say comparatively, but when we dredge that, we have to over dredge then backfill. We have to put in clean material. So Miriam does have a cost on what clean fill would look like. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that we could look at. If, you know, does it make sense to dredge the kayak area? Because we know that that's going to continue to be used, and it's only about 22,000 cubic yards of material, but which would then also scale back our grant amount. So we have some decisions to make here. And you guys got some ideas on how to help us make those decisions.
Yeah, obviously, again, I agree. We could have a whole workshop on this, certainly.
We may need to.
I think we need to.
So I definitely have all kinds of comments, but yeah, so.
This is budget, so yeah, maybe we'll get through this and hopefully we'll talk about scheduling that workshop. So again, the current plan is to potentially not dredge and save that for another year while we continue forward with the upland improvements. That's a good opportunity there for us to, which you'll see in the next slide here. You do see the service boat is still in there. Commissioner Kaiser and Fawcett, I know, talking with you folks, you had some issues, Commissioner Sorber as well, about that cost, that price tag. And I mentioned to you that number was based on some actual boats they were looking at that we definitely missed out on. I know you have concerns with that price tag with what we're doing with pets, so.
I'd just like to see what we want to use the boat for and what we require in a boat, basically.
I'd like to see the boat as well. I mean, yeah, I'd be curious to see.
Given the price tag and where we're at financially.
Yeah, and I know we have leased some material on some boats that we have looked at. Do you have stuff we could just show what the idea of what we're looking at after the meeting? Or? Okay, yeah, well, if you have time afterwards, we'll look.
Part of the next session, whatever.
Yes, sure. So the upland stuff, I will say, is a good opportunity for us. We're talking about, Guy's idea was as part of developing a plan for the next fiscal year would be to have a study done or have somebody help us with, just giving infiltration rates, flows, what do we expect? Is that channel gonna get worse? Is it gonna get better? Does it make sense for us to dredge the bathtub marina footprint when you can't get in and out? There's a lot of different things to consider there. And I think having a study or somebody help us with that to point out, you know, do some deep dives into some things that'd be really good for us. I'm not looking for cover for us if we were to close the marina. I'm not saying we're closing the marina, but you know, here's what it's going to look like expenditure wise for the port to continue operations for all boats, you know. And maybe it says, hey, you can't do sailboats anymore, but have somebody help us with some of the difficult questions. And maybe that involves having hydrographic survey done at the channel as well, just to see what kind of trouble that could be. This is a recommendation by staff. If we instituted the port tax, we could go dollar for dollar. If you look back here, we got $400 in grant. If we had the port tax, we could apply that directly towards a project. The upland stuff is, you can see. And as we know, it's a very popular destination for the paddle sporters, as well as the shallower draft, the vessels that are able to get in and out of there all times of the year. That's what port staff's currently recommending. I'm sure that'll bring up some conversations.
Yeah, sure will.
I say that I think the port tax is something that we've tried to avoid doing. And I've always said, if we're going to do it, it better be something that really benefits the community. And given that Scappoose Bay is probably our most used facility by the community at large, and we subsidize the rates for people within the district, it does seem like a pretty good use of the port tax.
Here's some of the, just so you know, too, some of the tangible things that we'd be able to see with the upland stuff is the wider sidewalks for pedestrians, including some security lighting, better access to the ADA parking, the new kayak unloading area, and security lighting and landscaping, and a new pay station, and also rebuild the current one. So those are some of the upland things that we would be able to see with that investment.
My only comment with putting the port tax to the use of that is we're currently funding a lot of really nice recreational development things in the South County. The port at one time had a presence at Jones Beach till the outhouses were blown up with dynamite. I'd like to see a proportionate amount of that set aside to help with some recreational opportunity, whether it's walking trails or fishing or some of that kind of thing that benefit folks that might live 50 miles away.
Yeah, I'd love to see kind of an overall plan,
Yeah.
what that looks like into the future, what our options are, what.
Somebody comes to me and says, why is this on my tax? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what sort of other facilities?
Well, my idea behind if we were to do the port tax would be to keep it on the in-water stuff, you know, the water related. We got Columbia City Dock that's got aging dolphins we need to replace. Port Westward's Beaver Dock is, 80 years old, 82 years old. That would be one idea.
Yeah, if we could do it this year for the upland work, I'd like to see a small proportionate amount of that dedicated to some. And one thing that comes to mind is the state just deeded or somehow contractually allowed the Beaver boat ramp to be managed by the county. That could use some help, something like that, something so that everybody who has that on their tax bill has access to some recreational.
I 100% agree with Robert. If something like that was put back into play, I mean, it needs to be something the public can lay eyes on. And I know how important the Beaver Dock is, but I personally think that it's the public needs to be able to see and or use, what this is, and that could be a lot of different, whole laundry list of things, obviously, but.
I'm in agreement, direct benefit to the public. The things you mentioned are really important. It's a hard sell. They don't care so much about pilings at the.
Well, you get to sign your port dollars.
Yeah. I've had Marina Chip and Nancy stops on that because it's something pretty important.
Well, I just wonder how the public would feel about reducing a current tenant's rent and instead putting the burden on the taxpayer. I think that's a very important viewpoint for us to take a look at.
Tenant was in.
Next.
I don't think they're a tenant. I don't see their,
Okay, leaseholder.
I think the business negotiations and I think the public I know would expect more Worcester docks, those kind of things to come from the business activities that support it. And the recreational monies to come from their tax dollars.
And I have a slightly different approach on next payments is that we would be getting zero
Right.
and now we're getting something.
Shows 15,000 over zero.
And I mentioned this when we talked about the next step. It was always surprising to me that we went from a option to a lease before anything was built. And so I, as one commissioner, don't have as much of an issue with that, but
No, I'm sure.
the perspective, the perception out there is.
Exactly. From our viewpoint, it makes perfectly good sense. From the public viewpoint, I'm not sure it will look that way.
Yeah.
I think the timing is not in our favor.
Not ideal. Yeah.
Not in love with bringing the port tax back at all. I'm just saying if it is, I think I'd like to see it. Spread the benefit out a little bit, if we could do. If there was a way to do this without the port tax, I would be much more in favor of it.
Well, of course, we can do it without the port tax.
It's just how much pain.
It's just the burden is on us, not on the taxpayer.
I have bad news. My battery just died.
Laptop, yeah.
It doesn't seem to.
We have no power here?
Yeah, I do have power. It's still up there. I'm gonna get a power cord. We're close. Guy, don't do it.
I have a sense of you. I completely understand what you're saying on the tax dollars. And it is nice to match one to one on a grant. And that shows that you're using public funding from taxpayers. They get a dollar for dollar bang for their buck. So that's a pretty good way to package things as well. So. Yeah, come on, John.
What else do you got? So, yes.
When it comes to Marine Fall, it's Brian. That's a widely used and it needed some help. And I don't know if the city needs assistance or if there's a. I mean, I like to go where the public is using the facilities and definitely Scappoose Bay Marina is being used and well loved by the public.
I think the other point to be made is it brings a lot of people into the community too. So there's some other benefits associated with that facility, not just for our folks that live here.
A lot of fuel and donuts and.
I think this would be a really good opportunity for us to reach out to the community and find out what the community thinks of this idea. I mean, certainly doing surveys in this day and age is pretty easy. And I think it would be valuable to know what the public thinks of this.
Thank you. Bear with me while I get back into the Zoom. Sorry, that was JV.
You'll do better tomorrow.
I will do better next.
Yes. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, all right. Okay, we talked about these already. And the rest I have, well, a couple of them here talk about the bathtub and the same pictures we were looking at earlier.
Man, love that. Things hooked to the stock market or something. It's just.
Then she gets mouthy.
I get that occasionally. It's something.
Admin and security, we have an aging software system that is gonna be not supported here in a couple of years, and I think guys reluctantly scratching those for this next fiscal year.
Yeah, I'm giving up.
Giving up too.
You got a typewriter back there? You're.
So we can manage without that upgrade for another year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Budget will look better.
He does have software envy, though. He was sitting next to Paula's finance person down at his conference, and the guy was approving journal vouchers on his phone, and he got really jealous, so we have a bigger, longer process for that, so. Currently, nothing slated to do out at Clatskanie Business Center. Again, so this is kind of where we boiled down the 2.9 that we're proposing is these four.
So that'd be 3 or 2.95 if we added back in the demo.
Yes. Yep. Mhm. That's it. That's all I have. Any questions? Lots of questions.
In process with the committee.
Yes. Yeah, the idea, yeah, we'll get that 50,000 on there. That'll be part. He's still working a lot on the operating side. So just so you guys are aware, the operating side is the money's coming in and going out on a monthly basis. And then the profit on that is what he moves over into the LGIP. And what he's been saying is that has been dipping down over time, the amount that we're contributing annually, so.
I want to talk to him some more about the insurance proceed issue, but after the meeting.
We can talk about it now if you want.
No, put these guys through it. but,
Okay.
um,
Only thing I would say on that, Robert, and I don't mean to,
No, I
Jack does.
Position, I just,
and we didn't show anything on this presentation about the next several years of projects. When we look at Fort Westward, and Elliot may have, I can't remember the details off the top of my head, but we're talking significant dollars to do the seismic work. I mean, not like, how much was it? 20 million or
29.
something like that. I mean,
opportunity to talk about.
but you know what I'm saying? I mean, we have to have some matching funds or some, we don't want to throw all our cash away now because there's some pretty big projects coming up. So that's all I was gonna say on that.
I was gonna ask you a question about the reserves. So we have 2 million in reserves. What does that equate to from an operational standpoint? Is that like 6 months?
You're very close, yes, about half a year. And there's a lot of talk on reserves and just kind of risk management at the government finance level. Just like how much do you need to set aside for reserves? Because technically that money isn't like being put towards projects and things like that. But what happens if something unforeseen, comes along and the port does have financial needs beyond what we're budgeting, if we don't have those reserves, are we really doing our job, prudently managing our funds? I mean, so that's kind of like a shock absorber there if there's something unforeseen that comes along, and there's all different ways to look at it. You can look at it a percentage of what your operating budget would be. Other ways to figure it out, but 2 million is a pretty kind of middle of the road estimation. Sometimes
You're pretty comfortable with that?
yeah, provided we don't have anything super major. But you'd have to, when something unforeseen comes like that, you just have to do your best to manage, but we don't want to put ourselves in a compromised position if we can avoid it with some future planning.
Do we have anything that formalizes what our reserve should cover?
It's funny you asked that because I was just looking for that recently and I can't find anything definitive, but I did talk a bit with Bob Godotti and he said it was brought up in the past with commission meetings and that $2 million figure was talked about, and kind of the consensus was that was a pretty reasonable number, but I would recommend, considering a actual policy on our
reserves and how we manage those and, you know, just kind of overall financial policy, so.
Yeah, it's usually based on a percentage.
Yeah, I was gonna say, $2 billion in 5 years is probably.
Yeah. I mean, that would be something that we should look at on an annual basis, you know, do we need to increase it 5%, 10% or?
Bob Godotti first did 2 million, it really meant something.
Yeah.
That was one inflation cycle.
That's just an aside, I'd be interested in that big form.
That was exactly what his email to me with an example policy was like, we may need to look at, you know, tweaking how we're doing ours. Because yeah, like you said, $2 million isn't as much as it was 5 years ago.
Any more questions? We'll see this again at budget meeting.
What to do? Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, fresh from his presentation at the podium, Sean Carter.
Thank you. I'm just gonna grab. You have my report in front of you, commissioners. And we had a really great event last Saturday, the Scappoose Annual Town Meeting. I was amazed at how well attended that was on a Saturday morning. Gina and myself and Nancy were there, and so were a lot of other people. A lot of good discussion with folks, people curious about what we do, how we do it. Really like those events. And then later that day on Saturday, Nancy and I met up again and met with Senator Jeff Merkley. And we got a little one on 15 or so with local leaders, and then attended the community session. And I think he's doing some good things. He's out there trying to shake it up and show his face around and answer some hard questions, and he's trying. This telling Columbia County story with Greater Portland, I wanted to actually talk just a little bit about that briefly because Sierra Trask is leading that up. And this is kind of the culmination of all these things that I think a lot of us have been to in the past, where we learn about how to do economic development and how to secure and retain your business and grow business. This is actually putting some boots on the ground and kind of some guerrilla stuff where we're going out and we're going to talk to the businesses in the county. The first task force is this Thursday. We're going to basically figure out what people are doing, what they want to do, and how collectively we can help. Columbia Economic Team's behind this, SBDC's behind it. And I think it's a great way to do, really a lot of what Amy does in business development is this, and it's typically focused around port tenants, right? What are you guys working on? How can we help? Are you growing? You want to expand your building? Here's what we can do to help you. This is on a broader scale, but also I think very helpful for the port. So Amy and I are going to participate in this. It's going to take some time and effort. And the idea is to see what folks are doing in the county and how we can help. Not just the port, but other entities too. So I'm looking forward to it. I know it's going to be a heavy lift. There's going to be a lot of hours involved in it, but I think the overall benefit to the area is going to be really good. Excited about that. That's Thursday. That's tomorrow night. 30th anniversary Coal Pack meeting. It's just a regular board meeting, but it happens to be the 30th anniversary. So that's kind of a neat one tomorrow. Or sorry, excuse me. Yeah, that is tomorrow. As is the Columbia County Business Community Connections Project. Telling Columbia County's story with GPI. That is today. I'm actually heading out to OMIC to do a tour with GPI folks and Paul Vogel and some other folks. And then we're going to go over to PCC OMIC and talk about how GPI is going to help tell Columbia County's story. Northwest ACT meeting is also tomorrow afternoon. Armitage wants to get together, which is great. He was in contact with me a couple times while I was back in DC last month. And he's wanting to stay engaged. So that's really good. We're going to have some lunch tomorrow and talk. Sorry, that's next Wednesday. Thank you.
Senator White.
Yes, Senator Wyden's local regional rep here. Thank you for that. The next week, also the PG next port call, South County Collaborative. Some of you remember that got postponed. Rachel Berry is now out at the city. And so we are going to convene without her and figure out how to move that forward and try to get the event scheduled, hopefully before fall. And let's see, that's really about it there. That's worth mentioning. Any questions for me? Okay. Thank you all.
Commissioner Fawcett?
Yeah, I have one item. I kind of want to talk about the second meeting of the month. We talked about it kind of off and on. Attendance has been not great, and maybe this needs to be an agenda item. I thought about it, talked to a few of you. I kind of wanted to make a proposal, see what everybody thought, a little bit of a compromise. As the person who initially proposed evening meetings, as has been alluded to, I do feel strongly about giving the public some other opportunities to come and comment and whatnot. Also, a lot of public entities only have one meeting per month, so there's a lot that kind of goes into play here. What I would propose is that we scrap the second meeting of the month, establish quarterly evening meetings in various parts of our district, and give people the opportunity to weigh in on important things about their community. So potentially a meeting in Clatskanie, talk about maybe Port Westward, Clatskanie Business Center. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about the marina. Maybe we do something about the marina. Airport's always an important one. That's just an idea I had because obviously we're not getting great attendance at evening meetings. It's tough for folks to get there. I empathize with that. It's tough to get home. We're not actually seeing a whole lot more public joining in the evenings. And for me, the whole point of it was to get more public input. And I do think the evening is best for that. But I think that it needs to be a little more specialized in terms of topics. So that's what I have. And I fully get that probably all four of you don't like it for one reason or another. But I did want to offer up an alternative to what we're doing now that doesn't really seem to be working well. So have at it.
Well, I'm curious about your ending remark. It doesn't seem to be working well. Doesn't seem to be working well for who?
We're not getting very much public at the evening meetings, and it's hard for certain commissioners to make it. And it's difficult when it's, especially in the middle of the winter. You know, for instance, Robert driving all the way back to Clatskanie at 9 p.m. is probably not a great thing. I wouldn't want to drive all the way back to Clatskanie at 9 p.m. if the roads are bad or whatever it may be. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
I would also add to that too. I mean, as far as support staff utilization, money spent, keeping people away from their families as well. So I agree with that.
But it's not about the court. It's about the public. And we are a public entity. And the more opportunities the public has to participate, my estimation and my philosophy, that's what we should be promoting.
I want to promote higher value opportunities, maybe less often, but higher value.
Well, and for instance, you know, we're probably going to be 4 hours in this meeting. If we broke it up and consistently had evening meetings, we wouldn't need to have 4-hour meetings in the morning once a month.
I personally would rather have that, but that's just my 2 cents.
Right. I understand from our personal standpoint, it is a burden to have an evening meeting. But we are elected officials. We didn't sign up for what was easy. We signed up for what works for the community. And I agree. I wish there were more people that came to these meetings. I certainly do. But that isn't the point. The point is we are available, and we are available on a consistent schedule. People can count on being able to come to us instead of always having to look and see when are we going to have an evening?
And I would propose that those be consistent.
Well, I certainly would appreciate, yes, I think consistency is very important. But, you know, it's up for a vote and we'll have to see where the vote goes. But I do think it requires some thoughtfulness, not just on our part. It isn't about the 5 commissioners. It is about the public. And I would like to have an opportunity and get the word out there so that people can come and give us their opinion. They can write to us, they can send emails, whatever. But I think we should at least have the courtesy of giving them advance notice if we're planning to make a change so that we can hear their input if they have it.
Yeah.
hearing an agenda item for meeting times. What I'm understanding.
I mean, I'd like to come to some sort of, I don't know if it's gonna be a resolution at that point, but, and this may not be the perfect time to have the full-on discussion. But I would just encourage us to look into it a little bit more and try to find a solution that is a little more workable for everybody.
I think in my time, I've been through 4 iterations of, hey, let's meet at night so more people can come, and they don't. And I don't agree that it's necessarily the public's job to come. They're more than welcome, absolutely. It's their meeting, it's their elected officials, and when they have issues, they should come. But the average guy or gal who comes home from work and is gonna go coach a little league team or something has better things to do. We should be talking to them, and that's what I'm doing when I'm not here in an evening meeting, is in my own community at the volunteer fire department organization or at Safeway getting my groceries, talking about port issues. So, I mean, I think that's what that, I believe, is what we're elected to do, is to be in touch with our public. It isn't just the time we're in this building in a meeting, you're a port commissioner. So I've just seen the nightly thing come and go and be of no value. It started the first time as a time to move workshops that were relative to communities. There was a NASCAR proposal, put a NASCAR track at Scappoose, big heated issue. And we said, hey, let's take an issue that's really heated in the community, have the meeting in the community. We met at Scappoose City Hall and invite people to come in the evenings that can come. And that's how it started. And it was never meant to be a meeting. And then we started having a few here, and then we'd say, hey, we got a couple of housekeeping things, we'll just slip in there. Well, then it became a meeting. I mean, it's always a public meeting, but it never became a business doing meeting. It was always this time for somebody who would say, hey, I'd like to be on the agenda, but I need an hour and a half. So that sounds like something we could set aside and come to specifically for that topic. What you're kind of talking about would be the same. The topic would be input, and then if there's something big going on, and maybe it's our job as we go to these communities to tell them more about what we're doing. I think Rainier comes to mind. It's very underserved by the port because we don't have no property there anymore. Columbia City would be good to go to one of their evening meetings, or sometimes we do a joint port council meeting where and talk, let them know how we're working on Lignetics. So
I also plan to get out after budget and touch base with the city councils and just giving a port update too. So
that's one of our.
What's your thoughts on it, Chip?
Well, the volume of complex issues we've been dealing with over the last 2 or 3 years, I'm surprised that we could even consider dropping down the number of meetings that we're having. I think there's more work than we can accomplish by just 16 meetings a month per year, excuse me.
You guys want to give direction to staff, or you want to vote on it next meeting?
I'd like to hear the staff's perspective on how this works for them too. I mean, I don't, I don't mind going back to day meetings as of the exclusive thing. I tend to agree with Robert a little bit that Brian noting that we didn't really get much attendance at night, but we do get more during the day. So maybe there is logic to that.
we serve at the will of the commission, or at least I do. We will do what you guys want. It is, can be a challenge to do things after hours and remote. I mean, here's great. Going remote is more of a challenge, just dealing with technology. It's not impossible, and I think we're getting better.
That brings up a point I forgot to make, that, you're right, there are things that we can get done in one meeting or that come up, maybe an emergency. I think a good option is to do a quick remote meeting. Well, I will say that remote and in person is not a great experience. But if everybody's remote, that's a half decent experience, in my opinion. I don't know how others feel about that, but that's how I feel. And we can still take public comment, that sort of thing. We don't necessarily have to. Yeah, drive from home and late at night or something like that. So.
But in addition to what we're discussing, I'd like to point out that as long as I've been on this commission, I've felt this way, and I think the commission has. But when a business needs a single purpose issue, there's no hesitancy to call a meeting. If they say, look, we need to close on a particular hangar at an airport, maybe.
Yeah.
Before your next meeting, no problem. We'll make the commissioners informed, discuss it with them, and set a phone meeting, a Zoom meeting. and get that issue taken care of, so.
A question came up, I think, earlier, prior to the meeting. What's the notice requirements for public meeting? Is it like 3 days, 7 days, 7 days?
It's all reasonable, but anything less than, more than 24 hours is special, less than 24 hours is emergency.
Okay.
So, now we're putting the agendas out on 1 week before, on the Wednesday before. That's our timeline.
I'm opposed to the emergency ones unless there's a real emergency, but,
Great.
but 72 hours notice or something on a single topic issue that we know is more to accommodate a business. Probably a bit.
I would just encourage everybody to kind of think about it. Maybe staff, if there's any concerns or thoughts, talk about it at the next meeting, go from there.
That'd be great.
So item one, what else you got, Brian?
That was really it. We're at 11:15. I'm here and it's late, so I'll let others go.
Appreciate all the hard work. Love the slides, love them. They're great, informative. I know it takes a long time to put those together, but I do really enjoy them because we are not boots on the ground out there. So I know we may not need those at every meeting, but that is really neat how you got that put together and doing that stuff. So I do appreciate it.
We refer to them a lot, actually.
Oh, they're great.
We go back to them very often.
Awesome.
Chip?
I've enjoyed the staff work that we've had for months now. So it's really high quality, and even when we don't always agree with some of it, it's still great quality. And so anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, I absolutely second that. Want to thank Brenda very much for coming and for the hard work you put in on that. Was very informative. Yeah, you've given, you certainly gave me lots of things to think about that never occurred to me. So I'm very interested to know where this might go and to dig deeper into this and to see where this might work for the port and the community as a whole. So thank you for that. And again, the Scappoose Town Hall meeting was really, Scappoose does such a great job. They are really good they've been doing this a long time. They're really good at it. They get a huge amount of community support and input, which is something I would love to see us build here at the port. And also with Berkeley, that was very, very interesting. And just briefly, I think the end of the meeting was the most interesting to me, because at the end, he was asked, what is the biggest problem facing not just our community, but the government as a whole, or the United States as a whole? And he said, well, actually, it isn't one. He said, I consistently hear 3 issues. One is housing. 2 is, my mind's going blank. 2 is mental health.
We're both there. Oh, my God. Scary.
Yes, and 3 is family wage jobs. And so he had everybody take a hand vote as to what they thought was the most important. And the most important was mental health, which I thought was very interesting. That was not what I was suspected would have been the top priority. So I think it informs a lot of what goes on in our communities and in the United States as a whole. That's it.
Before you close, do you mind, can I say something real quick? Commissioners, if I could just bring this up.
I'll do more, and if you want to be the one.
I was just gonna say, before you say you want to go to executive session, consider, we do have the end of the month to hear back from PGE. Would you consider waiting, see what their response is, of not going to executive session here, wait to see what we get back?
Okay.
I think that would be an appropriate approach.
And appropriate, your call, so okay, could avoid going into.
No, that's fine.
Sorry, Robert.
No, that'll give you a chance for some nice slides for e-session.
Or as I often say, there's a PowerPoint for that.
He does, he says that a lot.
Sometimes we have to cut the number of pages down. I just had 2 quick points. One, to the maintenance staff, I mean, what kind of got buried a little bit in Miriam's discussion was there's discussion of building those pay stations rather than farming out. With the cuts we've had to make to the port shop and maybe the port boat likely, it looks like we don't value them, but this is not the case. So I see good work from them a lot out of Port Western, doing things that would cost a lot of money to have professionals come out and do, like the water systems. And this thing at the marina. So I do much appreciate that. And I hope there's a time when we can find some funds to get things taken care of for them. And the second is just that some of the arguments, discussions, debates we've had here, it's just the reason there's 5 port commissioners. If we wanted 1 port commissioner, they would make all the decisions, it'd be easy. So I appreciate everybody's point of view on all these issues. And it means a lot when I hear from one of you guys a different point of view. So thank you. With that, is there any further business?
Quick, I'd like to acknowledge Mike Sykes being here, Columbia River PUD General Manager. Thanks for joining us today. Dropping by some propaganda, looks like.
I'd say he's been in this room a lot, but not this room.
Actually,
That's what I was gonna say. I was hoping they were donuts. I seen him open them though, and I was like, no, so yeah.
some industrial brochures that the PUD funded he's dropping off.
I was gonna give these to Gina, and I just want to compliment your staff for their efforts as collaborative effort to coalition and talk about what we as leaders to make sure we're all working together and on the same page. This is a result of that, and I think it's a good product, and Gina and Amy and Sean are all very valuable parts of the team, so.
Can we get a sneak preview?
It's really.
Anything else?
That's it. Yep.
I'll adjourn the meeting and Mike's